This program deals with themes of an adult nature and is intended for a mature audience.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on the KTPF Community Talk Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for our new weekly radio shows. The KTPF Community Talk Show is supported by Phenomenon Magazine and Beyond Parazine, available online now.
The KTPF Community Talk Show is sponsored by Dragonos Castle, South Wales, one of the most haunted castles in Wales. For more information on ghostly and ghastly events, including Fright Nights, all-night investigations and hen parties, visit www.mosthauntedcastle.com.
The comments and views expressed on the KTPF Community Talk Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the views of ourselves or of our sponsors.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
They've landed.
You're in the right place. Online, on the web, and on air. All over the world.
Talk Radio.
You hear us, we hear you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the KTPF Community Talk Show, live from Manchester on www.ktpf.co.uk. My name is Suzanne.
And I'm Steve.
And I'm Andy over in Essex.
Yes.
Choking to death as well.
Choking to death.
And coughing his...
all that fresh air he's had. And we are here keeping the paranormal friendly each and every Sunday. So sit back with your favourite beverage while we bring you a relaxed show full of supernatural, paranormal and other strange phenomena. We incorporate a wide spectrum within these fascinating subjects. So if you have any questions for our guests, then you can use our live interactive chat room where we will pass them on to any questions onto our guests for you, or you can call in and speak to them directly by adding ktpf.paranormalshow to your Skype contacts. Later we will have the rundown from the events provided by our sister site at paranormaleventsforyou.com. We would like to acknowledge those in our chat room that are listening tonight. Thank you for joining us. And for those that will be tuning into our radio replay on our YouTube channel at the KTPF Community Show, where you will find all previous shows dating back to 2012. On tonight's show, we have David M. Roundtree, hopefully. He's in New Jersey in America, so I'm hoping he's got his timings right. And he began his research in the paranormal professionally in 1976 and has experimented with both scientific as well as metaphysical techniques in his study of unexplained occurrences. His primary focus since 1998 has been EVP research, employing his background of audio engineering and psychoacoustics. In 2005, David successfully linked electromagnetic fields as the primary source of EVPs, and his EVP research has led him to the development of his wormhole theory and multiverse theory concerning the source of paranormal events. So that should be interesting, shouldn't it, Andy?
I'm very interested to hear what he has to say, actually. It's my kind of thing, trying to find more of a scientific explanation for this stuff. You know, as I totally believe the sort of things are real, but I like to find a more scientific kind of analytical approach rather than simply believing in fairies. So yeah, I'm quite interested to see what this guy has to say, for definite.
Well, we're going to talk to him about all sorts of things, talking about paranormal phenomena and also about techniques and stuff like that. So we'll find out what he's all about. So hopefully he will be available to join us on the show this evening. And that he hasn't forgot or having trouble getting to us at all.
Well, we have a background plan. We have a backup plan if he does. So
This is
we're
it.
not panic not.
Now, I'm using a new laptop tonight, so hopefully there won't be any problems with the Skype connection. So fingers crossed that everything goes well tonight. After
Indeed.
a couple of weeks I've had in the past few weeks, I'm hoping everything goes well for us tonight. So, as I say, it should be a good evening. And without any further ado,
You have a do.
we have a do.
Doo-doo.
Are you ready for us, Steve?
I'm ready.
So we're going to hand you over to Steve for the observations.
Tell you what, it's getting harder and harder to get these observations.
I bet it is.
Trying to find ones that we haven't already spoken about because they keep coming back to us. We're starting with a murder victim's spirit haunts children.
All right.
The eerie face peering behind the young child in this photograph is thought to be a spirit of a murder victim. Paranormal expert Malcolm Robinson said the woman who took the picture of her son in Alloa, Clackmannanshire, in 1972 never noticed anything spooky until a clairvoyant told her to take a closer look. Investigators later concluded that the apparition was not down to double exposure or a camera malfunction and could offer no rational explanation. The photograph is just one of the exhibits which will be presented at the annual Scottish UFO and Paranormal Conference in Edinburgh Pleasance Theatre on Saturday, June the 20th. I think that was yesterday.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
It
it
was,
was.
of course, it was, yeah. It was, Alison, one of our listeners, it was their conference, wasn't it? Of course,
Yeah,
yeah.
she was telling us about it last week. Others in the show is supposed to be a fairy, several other ghostly figures. Mr. Robertson is one of the organisers of the event, said we are not there to convert anyone, we are there to present our conclusions and the reasons behind these conclusions. This image of the boy is fascinating. We did some digging around it and discovered a little boy had been murdered in the area some 15 years previously. I wonder if this could be spirit face. We are not saying that it's definitely the case. We can't prove that. But if we rule out any camera or film malfunction, what other explanation is there? You can follow the event organiser and paranormal investigator Alison Dunlop said the conference was aimed at true believers and skeptics alike. There you go.
I can't see a close-up. It says as you scroll down, close-up of the ghost. A closer look at the Alloway ghost spot, but there's no picture there.
It's,
And I can't see anything in that black and white picture other than the boy.
yeah, it's the face you're looking at is down behind the young boy.
I can't see anything. For some reason, it said that the enlarged version isn't showing up on my page, and I can't see anything in the background around that boy, other than the fact the photograph was taken in the year 1972, which is interesting.
Let's just see. Let's just see if I can bring it up on mine. Mine's a bit slower. Can you see it, Susie?
No, I'm sorry, I'm somewhere else. I'm
No, you're
afraid.
somewhere else. Okay.
Hold on,
Oh,
let me have a
oh.
look. Where are we looking?
Yeah, I'm not seeing a larger version, but
I can see the boy's face.
if you see the
but
boy,
I think it's
if
pareidolia.
you see the boy, that's certain. Face is probably down behind his back, if I remember rightly. But I would agree. It's liable to be pareidolia more than anything else.
Yes.
Listen, guys, I'm going to have to shut down my computer and restart. It's something's going on here.
Okay then.
I'll
We'll
come
see
in
you in a
after
bit.
Okay, then we shall carry on.
Bye bye.
Carry on regardless. Right, where was I? Oh yes.
I've got to open up my Twitter. I'm a bit slow tonight.
Oh,
Bear with me, guys.
you're not twittered.
I'm not twittered.
I don't know. Well, there's the second one anyway.
Okay.
Here we go. A mysterious ball of light which reportedly appeared at 4 a.m. at a synagogue in Ukraine was the result of a rare but natural phenomenon according to the temple's rabbi, the British Daily Star reported on Monday. Please forgive my pronunciations here. Chabad Rabbi Michael Oishi, who lives in the city of Zaporizhzhia in southeast Ukraine, spotted a ball of white light on closed-circuit television footage taken in the early morning hours. The footage shows the bright light appearing out of nowhere and floating around the synagogue's parking lot for 20 seconds before disappearing. Rabbi Oshi, who is from Jerusalem, posted the 32-second video clip of the incident on his Facebook page and said he believes the hovering light was a lightning ball, a rare atmospheric electrical phenomenon known as a fireball. Can you see that picture, Susie?
I'm just going to have a look now.
Yeah. One of the rabbi's Facebook friends responded to the video with his own explanation, saying infrared light can blind the camera, and if someone with an infrared flashlight, another simply called the light creepy.
No, the video's not playing for me for some reason.
Not playing for you? Oh, I don't know. Having said that, the gentleman is right. If you infrared light faces towards a CCTV camera, which is obviously has infrared on it, you will get a white flash out.
You will.
We found that ourselves when setting up for investigations, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
When we've had to move cameras because they've caught each other. Okay. Once again, this examiner managed to catch something strange in the night sky over Hamilton, Ontario on June 3rd, 2015.
Is this a new one?
This is another one.
Can you just hold fire a minute?
I will hold fire.
Going back to that first one, Mozzie, if you look at the top picture, and if you have a look and you can see the...
you can see the boy.
You can see the boy in that top picture. There's like a stone... looks like a hole or something with stones around the side of it. If you look to the right of it, you can see the side of the boy and his shoulders and his arm there, so maybe you'll see that. Okay.
Yeah. It is quite hard to see.
So,
and the page when I originally see it,
maybe it's not pareidolia. Maybe it's what's named photoshopped.
It could be quite, but I think the article did say that it was it had been checked.
Oh, had it? So okay.
They've checked the camera, they've checked the actual photograph itself, but originally there was a bigger picture there.
Yeah. So okay, on to your next
For
one.
some
then,
reason
Steve?
that's not showing. It come down.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm back.
Okay.
Okay. Once again, as I said, this examiner managed to catch something strange in the night sky over Hamilton, Ontario on June 3rd, 2015. The sighting was also witnessed by two other residents. The first photo was taken at 10:14 p.m. with the last one at 10:19 p.m. So the sighting lasted about 4 minutes in total. In the first set of photos, there were two objects that appeared to be white lights. They were floating upward at first for about 2 minutes and then came to a stop, hovered for a bit and appeared to become much brighter, and obvious red can be seen on the otherwise white objects. They then began moving sideways in a westerly direction, eventually just disappearing. One of the other witnesses noted that the sighting was totally freaky. Alien Cosmic Expo. If you're interested in UFOs and alien, be sure to attend the Alien Cosmic Expo. You can contact them at the Alien Cosmo. Sorry, I will say that again. AlienCosmicsExpo.com, and you can find all the information there, which will be held on the 26th and 28th of June 2015 at the Brantford Best Western Branch Park Inn and Conference Centre in Brantford, Ontario. So that's all for our folks on the other side of the pond. This will be a great opportunity to listen and meet a variety of well-known people, including nuclear physicist and UFO researcher Stanton Friedman, former Canadian Defence Minister, and the Honourable Paul Hellyer, UFO investigator Grant Cameron, remote viewer Michael Telstar, spiritual medium Gordon Ellison, hypnotist for experiences Leslie Mitchell Clark, and many more. So
Everyone's having a
having an
conference.
expo.
Having a conference or an expo this time of year.
Well,
Okay.
Well, the weather's nice for it, isn't it?
Mm.
Well, it should be anyway.
Yeah. 'Cause that's where David Roundtree is.
He's gone to the expo. It's a little bit early for that one. Here we go.
What's next?
Astronomer Royal.
Pardon?
The Astronomer Royal.
Oh yeah.
Royale, shall we say? If we find aliens, they will be machines, he says. Professor Lord Rees told the Cheltenham Science Festival the first contact with aliens will be through robots. Alien contact is likely to come from machines living on other worlds outside of the solar system. The Astronomer Royal, Martin Rees, has said Professor Lord Rees, 72, of Cheltenham Science Festival, I'm not holding my breath for signs of extraterrestrial life, but said if a signal was picked up, it would not be from organic life or like humans. He said that most space exploration will be carried out by machines which would not constrained by the physical difficulties of existing in space or other planets. I think it's quite likely that within a few centuries the overriding intelligence will be machines, because they will have an easier time spreading beyond the Earth because they are not organic. Most explorations will be by machines and not humans, he said. If you were to detect a SETI signal, it would be far more likely that it would come from a machine and not an organic creature. There has been just a thin sliver of time when organic beings have existed, and billions of years after, machines will take over. They will be the future. Professor Rees said that only a few adventurous humans would ever leave Earth to colonize the solar system. They would be forced to use technology to adapt to inhabitate worlds and new civilizations. He claimed that such cyber adaptations to new planets or moons would mark the start of a post-human era. Space Adventures Limited is already planning the first tourist ships to the dark side of the moon, while SpaceX, the company founded by Elon Musk, which regularly delivers payloads to the International Space Station, is hoping to start transporting tourists as well as cargo into space in the near future. Here we go. Do you fancy going into space, Andy?
Yeah, man. The idea of going into space. Oh, you mean like in a spaceship? Yeah, sounds good to me. Yeah. I would love it, but I don't think it's going to be financially viable for me. By the time it's cheap enough that we can actually have a holiday in space, I think we'll all be long gone.
Yeah.
Yes, guys. Grandchildren's grandchildren may have a chance, but that's about it.
Yeah. The only thing that bothers me about this machines thing is that if AI suddenly realizes that human beings are the problem on this planet.
Well, there was something they were talking about on TV this morning. There really is no chance that we're going to be able to build artificial intelligent machines in anything like a reasonable near future, because the way in which they'd have to operate, we'd basically have to go back to square one in terms of computer design, because the way in which a computer works is fundamentally different to a human brain. The biggest single difference is that all computers work in serial. They're one thing at a time, billions of them very, very quickly, but one thing at a time. Human brain works in parallel. There are many, many things going on simultaneously, and a computer isn't capable of doing that. And that would be the problem. We have to go right back to the beginning and redesign computers fundamentally differently to how they're designed at the moment. So it's not likely to happen in the near future, or in fact the medium to long-term future, because it's literally from scratch redesigning all machines, all computers.
So we're waiting for the next big jump in technology then?
Well, not so much big jumpers in gigantic, huge, massive, unbelievably big leap for that possibility. So yes, it's unlikely to be the case for many, many generations. I mean, probably hundreds of years, because as I say that the fundamental basics of how a computer works would have to be redesigned from scratch.
Yeah, that would be from this planet anyway. Yeah.
Oh yeah, obviously. I mean, it may be that the most likely way is organic computers that have actually been grown. You know, like basic animals being grown ourselves, like almost cloned brains. That's the only realistic way it could happen.
We are going really
Science fiction, here, guys.
Oh, God, yeah, absolutely.
Growing computers. Okay, here's your next one. Virginia witness at Fairfax reported watching a large square-shaped object with bright lights at 4 points and centered red lights on its bottom side, according to testimony in case 66278 from the Mutual UFO Network witness reporting database. The incident began at 12:40 a.m. on May 25th, 2015, when the witness and his daughter had a strange feeling about their environment and decided to explore the area on foot as a ghost hunt. We observed the sky, and a few clouds that were there moved at a strange, unsteady pace. The moon looked blurry, and there was a breeze that had a feeling of uncertainty attached to it. The witness stated, there were the 3 graveyards within a very short walking distance of our home, and we frequently go ghost hunting with great success. So we thought maybe there was something paranormal going on. The two first walked to the large grassy park near the graveyards behind their home, and it's an open area with very little interference at night, and there was a great view of the sky. We stood out there for several minutes to try and get a feel of what may be going on, and it felt a little creepy as we were being watched. They were able to see a shooting star, followed by a second shooting star a few minutes later. Immediately after the second one, I looked to the northwest and saw what I thought may be a large airplane in the distance. The only thing that seemed odd is that there were 2 large bright lights, and they were not blinking. The witness asked his daughter to look at the object, and as it was moving at a slow pace and towards them, it appeared to speed up a little and finally got close enough for us to see that it looked like a giant black square. Because it was dark out, it was very difficult to see any detail except for the lights on it. The witness described the object as it flew slowly and quietly without no sound less than 2 miles above their heads. We witnessed that there were 2 large round bright lights in the front, not blinking, 1 small red light on the bottom, blinking very slowly, and 2 large bright lights on the back, blinking in unison every couple of seconds. The 2 began waving their hands and shouting at the object. The craft slowed down temporarily over our heads, and then slowly increased speed again to continue on the straight path it was flying. It flew at a very slower pace than any airplane I have ever seen, and when it got a few miles away, we saw that it had stopped and was hovering. It stayed there about a minute and then slowly increased speed again, eventually disappearing from our sight, although it was a great distance away when we last saw it, thanks to the large bright lights. That's the first time I've heard of a big square one.
Yes, that's unusual, certainly. Used to seeing circles and triangles, but a square one. I mean, the fact is, because there's no resistance in space, there's no real reason why a spaceship has to be any particular shape. I mean, we aren't talking about conventional thrust mechanisms that you'd have in a sort of an earthbound spaceship, like the spaceship, etc. Use an old-fashioned sort of thrust system that pushes against itself in order to push the ship forward. Unlikely that would be any kind of propulsion that a spaceship that's travelling interstellar or certainly massive distances could use, because it would be just too slow. No matter how much force you put into something like that, it'll never go faster than the speed of light, because it's just impossible. So it'd have to be a different kind of a propulsion system that doesn't have to necessarily rely on being a certain shape. So yeah, there's no reason why it couldn't be a square, circle, or triangle, or whatever you like.
Some form of reactor propulsion. Maybe.
Is that your last one, sir?
No. There's the next one.
Good.
There we go. Collier County, FLA. The haunted apparition hunters based out of Naples say they've been pulled, punched and spoken to by a ghost in a Golden Gate home. The family who lives in the home say it's the spirit of a man who sometimes hangs out in the yard, upstairs and downstairs. The spirit has been bothering the family and appeared to them, so they called the ghost team. Wink News joined the crew on their full visit to the home. During our interview about the home, Eric Kincaid turned on the white noise box. It's what it says is a way for ghosts to verbally communicate. We thought we would pick up some sound of the static on our cameras, but much more happened. Voices came out the box. Lights lit up on the machines, and Kincaid's pendulum began swinging. It was much more than we had bargained for, and it was frightening. The question and answer session went on for about 10 minutes, and then it disappeared as quickly as it appeared. The haunted apparition hunters say they would take people on investigations with their team. It costs $35. The charges to help pay for their equipment. Well, I'm sorry guys, but you don't need all that money every time for equipment.
Wait, it works out about what, 20 quid?
Yeah, I mean it is cheap enough, but
that's an excuse. Equipment. I mean, it's paying for your teas and coffees. Let's be honest, guys.
yeah, teas, coffees, petrol.
Yeah, exactly.
Or diesel, maybe a bit towards your insurance, assuming they have some. Well, that one, as they say, is it. That was my last one.
Was it?
That was indeed.
Okay. Let me just do my Tupenneth.
Your Tupenneth.
I've just noticed something on Dave Roundtree's Facebook page. I'm just wondering whether the curse of the hurricanes got us again.
Oh no! Wow. What have you seen?
Yeah, last time we spoke to me, we just missed the hurricane, didn't we?
Yes.
Well, we got half an hour off of him, didn't we? So I'm just checking the weather.
Yeah, then he went all bye-bye.
So
Excuse you.
It's bad news.
I don't know why, but he's put on there that South Dakota tornado watch. Why he's put that, I don't know.
Oh dear.
And he had tornadoes last time we spoke to him because we only got about half hour, didn't we, from him? So, oh my God.
It's cursed, so he is.
He is cursed.
We do have a backup plan, as we do know that's been discussed, and we can go for it. Do you want to give the guy a couple of minutes just to get
well,
through?
I'm going to do my Tupenneth anyway.
Of course, yes, go for that.
Right, so let's do my Tupenneth. Considering it's Father's Day, this was quite apt, I thought. Ghost of our granddad helped us find our long-lost dad 30 years after we last saw him. The voice was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. Please find your dad, don't give up. For Claire Seville, that they were powerful words, as it had been more than 30 years since she and her sister had last seen their father. Claire, 37, and Sarah, 42, had tried to forget the hurt George had caused when he disappeared from their lives, but hearing the words made Claire realise she wanted her happy ending, especially as the plea came from her late grandfather from beyond the grave through a medium. Claire had gone to a medium in an attempt to help her cope with the loss of her maternal grandfather, who helped raise her, but she was blindsided with the medium when the medium passed on a message from her other granddad, her long-lost dad's father. She said, "I knew who it was straight away. He told me he wished he had done more and pushed for more to see my dad. He said, please find your dad, don't give up. I wasn't expecting that at all." Then her sister, Sarah Shelton, 42, went to a different medium and heard a near-identical plea from the same grandfather. With a clear message from the other side, the sisters decided to track down George, so they contacted a family tracing agency. And 5 years after that first otherworldly message, they have finally been reunited with their dad in time for Father's Day. Speaking of the moment they met in a cafe in Birmingham last month, Claire says, "I tried to keep it together, but I burst into tears." Sarah says, "As soon as he walked through the door, I recognised him. He was just like I remembered him." There has always been a gap in our lives, and finally a piece of the jigsaw that has been lost for all of these years is in place. For George, it was the moment he had been wishing for since 1983, when he had last seen his daughters. He says, "When I walked in, Claire just put her arms around me. Then Sarah did the same. There was a lot of tears. It was a wonderful moment, but George, who was traced to Bradford, West Yorkshire, also knew he had questions to answer. George Seville had met the girl's mother, Margaret, in Birmingham in 1970. They married a year later, but after the birth of Claire, who later changed her name to Seville, cracks started to appear in their marriage. They split when Sarah was 6 and Claire was just 3 months old. He says, it was very hard to leave, but I thought it was the best thing to do. I just had to leave and go back home. He says, I'd always think about them on their birthdays and every Christmas. Sarah of Bromsgrove, Worcester, says, Dad missed out on the key things in my life, like graduation, getting married and having my boys. That made me think about him. They made me think about him. Instead, it was their maternal grandfather, also called George, who stepped into their father's figure role. But after he died in 2010, Claire struggled with the grief and was so desperate to speak to him, she went to a medium. It was then she got the message from her other grandfather, Stanley, her dad's father, who had died in 2004 at the age of 84. Claire then started to try to look for her dad online, but Sarah was much less enthusiastic. Sarah says, I wasn't sure I wanted to meet him. I was worried the outcome would be rejection again. Then 2 years ago, Sarah's friend suggested she get a reading about her future from a medium, and Stanley sent the sisters another message. Sarah says, he told me he was very sorry, felt he had not done enough to keep the family together. I was shocked. When they celebrate their first Father's Day with George in 3 decades today, the girls will present him with a photo book that captures the years he missed. Sarah says, we thought it was a great way to share some memories with him. They will also be sparing a thought for the granddad who helped bring them all back together again. Claire says, when my granddad came through, it gave us a push we needed to get it sorted. George had never been a believer in the supernatural before, but says he is now keeping an open mind. He says, it doesn't surprise me if Dad did intervene because it's what he would have wanted. Whatever it was, I am so glad it happened. I've never been so happy as I am now. It's made me complete. And you can go and read that and the rest of the story as well at that link later on, because there is a bit more in depth about the story. So that's a very good happy ending, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting. I was having a chat with a friend of mine who runs a shop in Glastonbury where I've just been. I've just come out from Glastonbury, obviously, as you guys know, but just telling everybody else. Been going to Glastonbury for the summer solstice, not the festival, the summer solstice, for the last, I don't know how many years, since the 1980s, quite literally. And we're there every year for that. We actually, my wife and I got engaged 13 years ago yesterday in Glastonbury. And I'm quite friendly with a few people, obviously going there so often. I was chatting with a woman called Sue who runs Labyrinth Books, and we didn't realise that each of us didn't know that the other one was adopted. We only found that recently, and she and we both were sharing our story yesterday about meeting our respective birth parents. My father passed away many years ago. My mum's still alive, but her father passed away too. But her mum's still alive, so interesting. So it was nice to find members of your family, even if for whatever reason they're not together. You don't see each other, so that's interesting.
How did you manage to cough then and keep talking?
Me?
Sounded like somebody coughed.
Paranormal abilities.
Are the spirits trying to tell us something? Because somebody coughed.
Sorry, that's my phone. It's right next to the microphone. I just realised it was a whoosh sound.
Oh, that must have been what it was.
Week of her and one of my guinea pigs, Arthur, and it looks like a selfie. Both her and Arthur are looking at the camera. He posed for it. It's quite impressive.
I don't know.
Well, how did you get hold of him?
I'm having trouble seeming to get hold of David. He was telling me in the week he was looking forward to tonight, so I don't quite know what's happened. and I don't really know what to do.
Well, shall I do my bits now?
Why not? Why don't you tell us your
Time,
bits?
and then see if he turns up. If he
let
doesn't,
me just tell you. Is it regarding next week?
well, I've got a few clips and stuff as well. But yeah, to talk about next week, I've got a few things to talk about, so I can keep us occupied for a few minutes.
Right. Well, I was going to say, I was going to say what was going on next week, but we'll leave that for a bit later on, and then you can come back and tell us about your bit.
Absolutely. I've got my mystery conspiracy files as well. I've got a few here, so last week.
What do you want to do now? Do you want to do the conspiracy files and give them
Might
a few
as
more
well,
weeks?
if you're still waiting for our guest, if he doesn't turn up, we've got other things we can do, but yeah.
Okay then, we'll do it a bit back to front. Front to back. Okay.
Here is, as soon as this works, I'm also experiencing some problems. For some reason, on my Mac, the chat room and web page keeps crashing. So I'm now running this on my PC as well, which is a little slow. But here's my first. Oh, it's now attempting to log into live stream. How annoying is that? Hold on a second.
We seem to have problems today, don't we?
First tonight.
I mean, first he's talking to us and someone coughs.
Yeah.
While he's talking.
I don't know what's going on. I don't have a password. I don't need a bloody password. Not mean at all.
Could we actually use Skype on an investigation?
Hold on.
Is there anybody there?
Talk about yourself.
Oh, yes, let me just close the door.
Oh, there we go. Ah, there we go. Yeah, it's there. It's arrived. It's landed.
Okay.
Now, there's a reason why this specifically, because we're back to front a bit, but there's the reason why I've chosen this particular one, but I thought it was quite fascinating. John Lennon, UFO linked to North Wales extraterrestrial Berwyn Mountains mystery. Da-da-da. Russ Killett said he now owns a sketch Lennon created, a 1974 UFO sighting. Leading expert on one of North Wales's greatest UFO mysteries claims to own a rare sketch by John Lennon created to record an alien encounter. And you can see the drawing is on the same website page. Now, the interesting thing I've noticed before I even started was the handwriting that says, for example, UFO 23rd October 74, about 9 o'clock. And then the writing directly above it to something John Lennon, the writing looks different.
Very much
Now, the main thing I notice is different is the amount of pressure used. Because one of the giveaways when someone's trying to fake something else's handwriting is pressure. Because you all push down at different hardness. So you can sometimes create quite an accurate copy of someone's handwriting, but if you don't get the pressure right, it won't look the same. So I'm a bit suspicious of that. Anyway, I'll read the rest of the story. Okay, so leading expert, blah, 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 created alien encounter he allegedly experienced in America. Russ Killett is known for investigating the 1974 Berwyn Mountains incident involving theories of extraterrestrial craft crashing in the area. Now, I must admit, I'm not super mega well known about lots of UFO stuff. I haven't read the occasional bits, but I'd never heard of this one before in 1974. Anyway, Mr. Killett said a few months ago he brought Lennon's sketch of an encounter he had with a flying saucer in New York, the same year as the North Wales incident. Lennon, whose first wife Cynthia died earlier this year and once lived in Ruthin, wherever it is, said to have had a number of drawings following the sighting. It claims that he was standing on the balcony of his apartment on the 23rd of August 74 with his former girlfriend Mary May Pang. The pair claimed to have seen the flying saucer hovering silently over them. In Lennon's song "Nobody Told Me," he appears to refer to the incident with the lyric, "There's a UFO over New York and I ain't surprised," apparently. Mr. Killett is a quite avid UFO collector of material and a Beatles fan who said he was when he was the chance to. That is saying that's badly written, isn't it? Said when he was the chance to acquire the sketch.
When he had the chance, yes.
He jumped at the opportunity. He said, a friend of mine told me it was becoming available from a private collector, and I thought, what a double dream for me. I'm a massive collector of all things UFO and a huge archive, and I'm a collector of Beatles memorabilia. I have a leather jacket worn by John Lennon in 1969 up to 74. So this was fantastic. It's one of the few he made of the incident. If one shows him This one shows him on the balcony pointing to the sky with the object which says there's a UFO on it. And there's a picture of some big burly bloke with an earring and a woolly hat, which I assume is obviously Mr. Kellett. However, Mr. Kellett remained tight-lipped over how much he paid for the sketch and said it's stored away in a bank vault. Mr. Kellett has been researching the Bowen UFO mystery for years. On 23rd of January, local... Hang on a minute. He said that it was on the same day, didn't he? When I read it earlier on, it said that the UFO sighting was on the same day as Mr. Kellett said the UFO thing happened in North Wales, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, not according to this, because apparently Lennon was standing on his balcony the 23rd of August, 74, and the UFO over North Wales the 23rd of January, 74. So it's not the same day at all. Months later. Anyway. Families in the village of, not going to say that, or that one, Landrillo, were sitting down to watch television when they heard an explosion and the ground shook. The eruption measured 3.5 on the Richter scale. As people ran from their homes fearing another tremor, they saw a blaze of light in the mountainside. A nurse believed an aircraft had crashed, drove to the site, said she saw a pulsating orange-red glow in the hillside and other lights. Mr. Kellett believes at least one extraterrestrial UFO may have crashed that night in the mountains. Meanwhile, others believe the unusual occurrence is nothing more than a coincidental combination of an earthquake, a meteor shower, and poachers' lights on the mountainside, all at the same time.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's interesting. I skimmed read this earlier, and I didn't notice the fact that the dates are wrong. If he's saying that, going back, he's saying this month, blah, 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 blah. On the same year of the UFO incident, yeah, I do apologise, yeah, so 74. But they are months apart.
Yeah.
But yes, it sounds more likely. I mean, they've been talking about the eruption measuring on the Richter scale. It sounds like it was a minor earth tremor, which possibly released some earth gas, which is often can be seen quite bright, but not necessarily UFO. But it's interesting they're talking about John Lennon putting cryptic messages in his lyrics about a UFO encounter over New York.
Yeah.
Because it brings me on to something I might well be talking about a bit later on, about cryptic messages in Beatles songs.
Yeah, there was quite a few rumours that John Lennon had actually seen one. And for our listeners in Wales, those two villages are Llandrfell and Llandrillo.
Well done.
Yes, double L is always Clan.
My father's Welsh, but I don't try the language. It's too scary to look at. One thing I'm never any good at is pronouncing strange names or languages. Anyway, here's my next story. Which is coming up in a moment too. Cloaked UFO or HARP. Mysterious lights over Greenwood, Indiana. Now, there's a bit of a video footage with this, which is worth watching if you turn the sound off, because it is rather strange from the Inquisitor. Scroll it down, and it should pop up any moment now. There we go. Just to play and avoid sound if you can, you'll see it. Very strange stuff coming up in an instant into moment. There we go! Hooray! Right, pretty much centre middle of the screen. You see it like a very intense torch beam moving around. Can you see it?
Yeah.
It's rather strange. Now, there's another piece of video footage further down which apparently shows something very similar in another location, but I don't know. This, according to the website, a witness reported seeing on the 12th of June 2015 strange lights in the cloud whilst riding his bicycle. The appearance of the lights in the cloud was so unusual that he pulled out his phone and began filming. The witness concluded that the phenomenon was the effect of the undisclosed ARP weather manipulation experiment. I had no idea what it was until I did some research when I got home and found out it was called HARP, a government research program. Take a closer look at the beginning of the video, right when the beam disappears for a second. It moves part of the clouds to upwards and then comes back. Now, I must admit, I couldn't really see that happening myself. I could see the light moving around, but I didn't see the thing he was talking about. I don't know if you can see it. Actually, clouds moving, or it's just the bright light moving.
It's weird, isn't it?
It's certainly bloody strange, that's for sure.
Like
ARP
flickers and
stands for
stuff.
High Frequency Active Oral Research Program, funded by the US military and the Defense Advanced Research Projects, DARPA. Conspiracy theorists believe that HARP has conducted clandestine weather manipulation experiments that trigger freak weather phenomena, including droughts, hurricanes, maybe that's what happened to our guest, was hit by one of those, and other natural disasters such as earthquakes. but UFO sightings daily, Scott Wary thinks it is a cloaked UFO having some fun at the top of the cloud. Okay. He observed that light seemed to be curving around a disc at the top of the cloud and suggests that UFO might be accidentally uncloaked by the sunset. The UFO cloak bends 180 degrees around it and below it. It appears invisible. When the sun is at 90-degree angle, it now makes one side of the UFO visible, apparently. However, scientists who have viewed the video and similar videos being uploaded on YouTube, see below for more, apparently, by amateur photographers, say the phenomena of dancing storm clouds and other similar shifting light effects are not linked with HAARP or UFOs. It doesn't say what they are linked to. The phenomena, according to meteorologists, is linked to storm clouds known as cumulonimbus. Those ones. The dancing patches of light appear to be caused by the cloud's changing water particles moving around in response to shifting electromagnetic fields as lightning strikes within the cloud. Yeah, that's interesting. However, scientists admit that more research remains to be done to elucidate for the first time, the physics of the electrical activity causing the effect. According to the Cloud Appreciation Society, yes, there really is a Cloud Appreciation Society, an expert, Les Cowley, said, "We do not really know what is happening. We need more hard evidence, more measurements and cloud physics modelling before we can hope to come up with a clear explanation. At the moment, we're nowhere near that position. But for long as scientists are unable to provide a definite natural phenomenon of the dancing storm clouds phenomenon, many will conclude that it resort to the popular HAARP or cloaked UFO conspiracy theory." So there you go. So, I mean, they seem to be saying that they don't think the video itself is fake, just that it's rather weird. It's quite interesting.
It is quite strange.
Yes, I think they're trying to allude to the fact that it's a natural phenomenon.
Yes, that seems to be what they're hinting at. Well, I must admit, I think if any of us will happen to be sort of out and about with a cloudy day and saw that, we'd probably get a bit freaked, actually, I think, because it does look pretty damn strange.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks physical. It looks like something is actually moving around and manipulating. Now, I know there's a fairly regular phenomenon that I often noticed once I read about it the first time. I've seen it quite a few times, called a second sun, where you do have light particles, that are ice particles, I should say, that catch the sunlight, and they can appear to be like a second sun, very bright, very sort of tense, like you're seeing in this video, but they're stationary. They kind of appear, and then they fade away as the sun sets. They tend to move like this thing's doing, so it is particularly unusual, I must admit. I thought it was rather interesting, the thought.
Yes, I agree.
Anyway, next little one from me. Let's hope this is work properly. Let me in, little machine. Come on. Not exactly supernatural, paranormal, but I thought it was rather funny. It's now telling me to log in again. I'm still logged in the first time.
It's one of them computer days. Sounds like it's all over.
There we go. Here it comes.
So,
Have you got it?
Yeah. The priest reported lifeless body was Papa Smurf balloon.
oh wow.
District police in Ryan Klaus Naus said the figure wearing red pants, blue outerwear, red cap and white beard was a partially deflated Papa Smurf balloon. Yeah, oh dear, yeah. It's a helicopter crew, no less, spotted a figure wearing red pants, blue outerwear and red cap and white beard, police said in a news release. The body turned out to be a partially deflated balloon in the shape of Papa Smurf, and known as Papa Schmumpf in Germany. Police shared a photo of the rescued balloon buckled to the seat of a patrol car for safe transport back to the police headquarters. Police officers took him to the police station and I can't talk now.
Did they grill him?
The police station have so far reached no relatives. The police said the witnesses were entirely justified in making the emergency call and they could potentially save lives under different circumstances. But, I mean, come on, for God's sake. If you can't tell that's a balloon, you do need your eyes tested.
I bet they felt well deflated.
I mean, it's rather flat. I mean, you'd hope you might get your eyes tested to make sure you've actually got eyes and are still sane. Seeing that bloody
Well,
thing.
the guys in the helicopter would have been using a camera, wouldn't they?
Well, you'd have thought so, yeah. So it would have more sense than that.
Well,
Anyway, I have now my last one, my little video of the week. Silly video of the week.
I love your weird video.
Silly video of the week.
It needs a little feature in all of its own, doesn't it? There we go. And it's coming from breaking news. UFO sightings. What are they testing? Let's have a look. When it starts to actually work, we will find out. Yes, now play. Oh, it's playing. Here we go. We got stop now.
What the
Explosion,
heck is
UFO, explosion, sightings. And here we go. This has got to be the crappiest piece of homemade Photoshop type video footage anyone's ever made. You see it?
Yes, I'm wondering how fast that could go.
It's like, my God, who the hell made this? It says, breaking UFO sightings. What are they testing? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. New video every day. Of course there is. They're making them all. And there's no other comments other than that because it's so silly.
You know that actually reminds me of?
I don't know.
A jellyfish.
Yeah.
It should be in water. It's moving like a jellyfish.
Yeah, so I think it's entirely made up of jellyfish type things.
And good evening, David. Where have you been? I do hope you've brought in your sick note.
Who's that, David Lloyd?
Yeah.
Right, he's arrived. There we go. This is my collection of news stories and videos of the week.
Okay.
It's been fun a hell of a lot this week, I have to say. There was a lot of UFO stuff. I don't want to just keep doing UFOs.
And if you just joined us, we seem to be having technical issues over in New Jersey in America.
The US of A.
Yes. I'm not quite sure what's happening. And
I'm gonna give him another try.
yeah. Well, I have been trying to contact him, but he's not nowhere on internet, not on email, not on Facebook, not on Skype. So I don't know what's happened.
Abducted. He's fallen through all these time warps.
He's gone through a wormhole.
Yep.
That's what it sounds like to me. So
Yeah.
what we'll have to do is reschedule, I suppose.
And Vizzy's just joined us as well.
Yes.
Has arrived. Well, we do have a backup show that's always been sitting in the files, which can now be rapidly unveiled.
Yes.
This season's little exploit. So the show is not lost. We're not going to have nothing. We do have a backup plan to talk about, and that it is. Dun, dun, dun.
So as I say, sorry guys that we haven't been able to get David Roundtree, but as Andy says, we have got a backup show coming up now, and it's full of interesting topics. Is the best way I can say it. What is it then, Andy?
Yes, and we will try and get hold of David when we can and get him back on.
It is, in no particular order, although there's some relevance of order to them, the top 10 conspiracies of all time. Now, I've tried to construct a list of some of the more unusual ones. There are some that I decided not to put on this list. Most of them have some paranormally-esque connections, so hopefully people will find them interesting. What I'm going to do is going to tell you them in order from 10 up to 1. I've kind of put them in an order, but they're not. No, they're not cast in stone order. Just ones I thought was a nice order for them. I'll tell you a bit about each one, and then we'll have a little chat about what we know ourselves or don't know. If you know nothing about it, guys, don't worry, I can waffle on for ages, as you well know. So the first one, number 10 on my list, is the Philadelphia Experiment.
Oh, I love that film.
And Dave Lloyd said the Earth is flat.
I love that film, The Philadelphia Experiment.
Now, what do we know about the Philadelphia Experiment? Let me just read a little bit to you that I have discovered. According to the urban legends, there are two separate and completely different Philadelphia experiments that took place. Both, however, involve the same vessel, the USS Eldridge. What happened to each of these alleged experiments? What evidence to support the rumours? Okay, there are two different sets of theories. Now, what I know for definite was the experiments were involving either cloaking, making the ship invisible, or teleportation of the ship, moving it from one place to another. It was apparently involved Mr. Einstein and some of his sort of theoretical works and ideas that they could actually carry out these experiments. Now, I'll just read what I've got here from this site, which is what really happened, and see what we think of this. Okay. In the first experiment, an alleged method of electrical field manipulation allowed the USS Eldridge to be rendered invisible on the 22nd of July 1943. The second rumoured experiment, as I say, was teleportation and small-scale time travel, which sent the vessel a few seconds into the past. Of the USS Eldridge, the Philadelphia experiment, blah, 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 was carried out in the Norfolk, Virginia Navy shipyard. Horrible tales of mangled seamen, that's double entendre if ever there was one, and sailors stuck within the metal of the USS Eldridge often accompany this experiment, with the USS Eldridge reappearing seconds later in the waters around Philadelphia. Recitation of the events surrounding the second Philadelphia experiments include a cargo and a troop transporter named the SS Andrew Tupenneth, whoever he is. Law of the second experiment claims those on board the Furnace viewed the SS Eldridge and its crew as they teleported into the Norfolk momentarily before the ship returned to the waters of Philadelphia. So they're saying they observed it momentarily appear in one place and then return to where it was previously. Prior to the mid-1950s, no rumours of bizarre activity surrounding any teleportation or invisibility experiment in North America during the 1940s, let alone around Philadelphia. Carl Meredith Allen, using the alias of Carlos Manuel Allende, sent a series of letters to astronomer and writer Morris K. Jessup. Jessup authored several early UFO books, including the mildly successful Case for the UFO. Allen claimed that the SSL Andrew Furnish, during the second experiment, witnessed the Eldridge emerge in the waters and quickly disappear into thin air. Carl Allen supplied no proof to verify what he claimed to witnesses on the 21st of October 1943. He did win the mind of Morris Jessup. He began to champion Allen's views of the Philadelphia experiment. Jesse, however, died 4 years after the first contact with Allen from apparent suicide. Moving a ship weighing several thousand tons leaves an inevitable paper trail. On the date of the Philadelphia invisibility experiment, 22nd of July 1943, the USS Eldridge had yet to be commissioned. So there's a problem there. The USS Eldridge spent the day of the alleged teleportation experiment, October 28th, 1943, safely within a New York harbour, waiting to escort the naval convoy Casablanca, to Casablanca, which is in North Africa. The SS Andrew Norfolk spent on the 28th of October sailing across the Atlantic Ocean en route to the Mediterranean port city of Oran. So in other words, the ship that was supposed to witness the Philadelphia appearing out of the blue was actually elsewhere as well. And in the early 1940s, the Navy did conduct experiments to make several vessels invisible in the Philadelphia shipyard, while in a different manner and completely different set of results were achieved. In these experiments, researchers ran an electric current through hundreds of meters of electrical cable around the hull to see if they could make the ship invisible to underwater and surface mines. Germany developed magnetic mines in the naval theatres, mines which would latch onto the metal hull of ships if they came near. In theory, this system would make the ships invisible to the magnetic properties of the mines. 60 years earlier, we are left without a shred of 60 years later, we are left without a shred of evidence for the Philadelphia experiments to have taken place. Yet the rumours persist. If you are still unconvinced, think of the situation from a different viewpoint. No incident, regardless of the horrific nature, would stall development of teleportation technology if the military believed it was feasible. Such a resource would be an invaluable frontline weapon in war and the backbone of many commercial industries. Yet decades later, teleportation is still caged within the realms of science fiction. So there you go, guys. There's a brief summary and reasons why it probably is complete nonsense.
Well, to my mind, if anything happened at all, I would say that it's more likely to be trying to do a cloaking device rather than teleportation.
Yes.
I think it would make more sense from a military point of view. Well, it would to me anyway. I mean, if you're going to teleport, you haven't got a clue what you're coming out in the middle of, have you?
I think what we probably got is a rather garbled version of the experiment I spoke about, the one in which they were trying to make ships invisible to magnetic mines the Nazis were actually deploying in the North Atlantic. I would imagine that's probably the actual story, and of course it's got all twisted and distorted out of shape in the intervening years. But it's interesting to note that nothing at all was heard of this until the 1950s. Now you think, if people had been involved, obviously the crewmen on board the ship had died or gone missing, there would be some kind of record of it. I mean, okay, it was wartime, but even so, these things don't just disappear completely. Yet there's no record whatsoever. So, again, as you rightly said, the teleportation, that would be incredible if you could actually achieve that. There are fundamental problems with fundamental physics that make teleportation pretty much impossible and could never really happen. But a fascinating one nonetheless. Any thoughts, Sue?
Sorry, I was giving somebody a number.
Because I thought it's just popped into Vizzy's head, and he's going to contact us and enlighten us.
Oh my God! Oh no!
Hello.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear him, Andy?
I can hear him perfectly fine. Yes.
Right. Good. How are you, Vizzy?
I am very well. I've been very busy working. Unfortunately, I'm going on as much as I'd like to. I did try and catch from the castle last week when I was there, so I'm running about. Anyway, before this loses out of my head and I lose track of what we've been talking about, he was talking about the Philadelphia experiment, and I'd just like very quickly share a story with you that happened to me. I remember it very well. It was 2005. At Craigenoss Castle, an American couple, I remember this very well, and it's bothered me for years, an American couple came to the castle, and they were staying for 3 or 4 days, and you know, and forgive me if there's any Americans listening, you know, they sort of like everything, really, the countryside, the castle, they like all that sort of stuff. Well, we should, but anyway. We sat in the bar talking, and he was saying his wife, and then we was chatting away to him, where you from, yada, yada, yada. And he said, you know, I asked him what he did for a living. And he looked at his wife, and he looked at me, and he looked at his wife again. He said, I'm a retired FBI officer. I said, oh, yeah, there we are then. You know, thinking he's bigging it up and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, cut a long story short, which I never do, but I'm going to try and do it this time. I said, well, really, FBI running about with guns? He said, oh, no, I didn't do nothing like that. He said, I worked in their science, he didn't go to the science, he maybe didn't mention it, but I don't recall what science department he worked for. Anyway, what was very interesting was, I was with a different girl at the time, I can't say too much. So anyway, we're sitting chatting, and he said, tell me these stories about the Roswell and all that. I said, yeah, sure you did. He said, I'll tell you one. He says, here's a little story for you. In a few years' time, he said, and I said, this was what jogged my memory about the Philadelphia experiment. He says, in a few years' time, you're going to hear about a ship that can be visually seen, and all of a sudden, it'll go off radar, but it'll also visually not be seen. I was like, yeah, whatever, of course you will. This guy's like in his 70s or whatever. And you could tell by his wife's face, he was like, when you're talking about Roswell, he's going, shut up. You know, I'm 70, it doesn't matter now. You know, that sort of approach. And lo and behold, in 2009, I believe it was, or 2008, it was a couple of years later, a few years later anyway, when they brought in an experimental ship that was able to be in front of your face, and they were using I don't know if it was LEDs or mirrors or whatever it was, but shipped from the side to be clearly seen, and then all of a sudden they'd switch a button that would go off radar, and then would disappear right in front of your eyes. So I thought it was very similar to the story of the Philadelphia experiment. I thought, well, I'll throw that in the mix to see if anyone ever heard of this ship before, or it was just my imagination, does it actually exist? Sorry about that. Just one of those things. Andy.
Well, that is interesting. It's certainly just little bits of research I've done. I know that obviously we're talking about stealth fighters, aircraft that are invisible to radar. And I know they're trying to develop ships that are invisible to radar. And I do wonder if sometimes these two get kind of mixed up by some sort of Americans. They're talking about literal invisibility or radar invisibility.
It would project the image from behind where it was to put it in the front of it, so it makes sense. So if it was on the port side, it would take the image from the starboard. If it was on the starboard side, take the image from the port side. Right. But that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, I just thought, sorry, I spoiled the whole evening by jumping in there. I just got excited. I thought, oh my God, it was like the experiment, and I know a little bit of the ship. Anyway, I'm looking forward to the rest of your top 10, Andy.
Okay, you've got a few to come.
Okay, take care, guys, and love enjoying the show. Bye.
Yeah, thanks for ringing in. That's great. It's I think quite often these sorts of things are misunderstood, misheard, misrepresented, kind of he said, she said, this said, and then these conspiracies start to emerge from these sort of misunderstood and slightly confused ideas, including, things like people's identity and who was where and what was when and stuff along those lines. So, entirely possible. Moving on to number 9 in the list of conspiracies, the one that probably is almost the most conventional, shall we say, on my list here, because it involved things that certainly did happen, and I had been on before and talked about this guy, but it's got to be the most famous murder conspiracy, I think, of all time, and that is the identity of Jack the Ripper.
You did it!
Yeah, absolutely. It was me. I was in a time machine, and I was on the Philadelphia ship in a time machine. Just very briefly run by the story, in case you didn't catch my show a few months ago, or have never heard of Jack the Ripper, in which case, where have you been? Jack the Ripper. It's a series of 5 murders, some say more, but most certainly just the 5, that were committed in 1888 in East London in various parts of the east of the metropolis. Each one involved quite violent murder, starting from slit throats to then being disemboweled, organs being removed, possibly taken away, or at least taken out of the body and put to one side. The 5 murders were carried out over a number of nights and began August the 31st, 1888, and the last one was November the 9th, 1888, which was culminated in the most atrocious murder of all, of Mary Jane Kelly, who was basically ripped to pieces in a little bedsit. That's the basics of the story and the murders. Now, of course, the question of identity has always been something of a mystery because there's no official known person responsible. There are lots of theories which range pretty much from the sublime to the ridiculous. One of the most ridiculous ones, which we talked about before, which kind of brings us a little bit into our usual field, was not just the royal conspiracy, but the Freemason royal conspiracy, in which the 5 murdered victims knew the fact that the then Prince of Wales had had an illicit affair with a Catholic woman and given birth to a child, and then actually married the Catholic woman. The woman herself was then locked up in a lunacy asylum, and the 5 women who were murdered were actually involved in babysitting and caring for the child, and all knew the secret. So William Withy-Gull, who was the Queen's physician, and a few other individuals involved in Freemasons' high levels of the government, set out to murder the 5 women who knew about the story of the child. The problem is, of course, the child itself lived on, and in fact was supposed to be the grandfather of the person who who claimed the story to be true, who in fact made it all up. There was also the story of another name I've completely forgotten for a second, it's gone out of my head, William Donston, who claimed it was part of a black magic ritual in which the organs were removed on specific sites for specific reasons in order to carry out a black magic spell. Apparently Aleister Crowley knew all about the spell and was somehow indirectly or directly involved in the magic, and it all went kind of nasty and horrible things happened. And Dalston then became a devout Christian and wrote books about the Bible. That's the most sort of occult come paranormal version of events, but there are other stories that are quite interesting that I would like to relate, linking this case of Jack the Ripper to the paranormal, and that brings in a good friend of our show who I think was badly duped, and that's Mr. Derek Acora. Now, I've got at home here a video or DVD disc of an investigation Derek Acora and a few others were involved in back in the 1990s investigating Jack the Ripper. Now, it's actually quite a good little program. Among other things investigated, they did look at the Jack the Ripper murders and claimed there was some kind of ghostly presence in one of the sites at Mitre Square. And indeed, I've been there myself in Mitre Square and felt an odd presence there, which is interesting. But he later appeared, of course, in good old Most Haunted, when they did a live show from a location that was never actually determined, although I think it was probably a brewery which is very close to one of the murder sites, Tissues Brewery, and he gave 2 names to Jack the Ripper, one of which everyone knows who's interested in this knows was completely made up, and the other one was based on the writer of a fake diary. And I do still say I think Derek was given that information by somebody deliberately to make him look like an idiot, because it was very close to the end of his involvement with the show. And I think the conspiracy there really is the way Mr. Acora was completely stitched up by the Most Haunted people at the end of his involvement with the show. So, what do you think of that, guys?
Go on, Steve.
No, I've heard that story before. It is very interesting. I mean, if you're gonna you could actually say that if the Prince thing is true, that the killings were actually done by 5 different people.
Well, the conspiracy would have involved at least 3 people who were supposedly involved with Freemasonry. One of them was Winston Churchill's father. The trouble was that Winston Churchill's father was never in the Freemasons, and nothing more to do with them at all. So the guy who invented the story, Walter Sickert, not Walter Sickert, is Joseph Sickert, who claimed to be Walter Sickert's son, who then claimed that Walter Sickert was the son of this illegitimate child. But the guy who came up with the story, Joseph Sickert, actually admitted himself totally it was all made up by him not long before he died. And he'd given the story to Stephen Knight, who wrote the book Jack the Ripper, The Final Solution. And Stephen Knight was at the time seen as a very good researcher, and he saw the story wholesale pretty much, and believed everything that Joseph Sickert, Bruno and Joseph Gorman actually told him. Unfortunately, it was complete nonsense. He then tried to claim that after Stephen Knight died, Joseph Gorman tried to claim that Knight owed him lots of money because he'd told him the story and never been paid, which turned out to be false as well. And another book appeared a little bit later on by, at the time, still unknown writer, who told a slightly different version of the story that Stephen Knight had written, and claimed that Stephen Knight was responsible for the mistakes in the first book, not Joseph Gorman making mistakes in his own story. So poor old Mr. Knight was getting blamed for everything, not only for supposedly stealing the story, but also getting the story wrong, which I thought was a little ridiculous. But look at Viscount's comments. Yeah, I mean, certainly the Prince of Wales, Prince Albert Victor, had certain adventures, shall we say. One rumour was that he actually died of syphilis when he was in 1890, I think it was. In actual fact, it probably was influenza. There's no sign of syphilis at all. But every single date of the murders, he was known to be elsewhere in the country, because there is a version of the story in which he was the actual killer himself. And that started in the early 1970s. In fact, the idea that he was the Ripper was the thing that started off the worldwide interest in Jack the Ripper. Before then, there were lots of writers had written about it, but it wasn't seen as a major story until, as I say, in 1972, I think it was. This article came out in a magazine called The Criminologist, which claimed that the Prince himself was the actual Jack the Ripper. And that made it much more popular. People like the idea of royal conspiracies, of course, and stories like that, but unfortunately, the facts don't match up with the story. So there we go. Okay. Number 8 on our worldwide conspiracy list is coming up. If I can just get this into work. Which, no, of course it doesn't want to. This laptop's awful, incredibly slow, and not working. It is...
If you've just joined us, ladies and gentlemen, just to let you know that we've had a bit of a problem connecting to our guest this evening, but we have decided to go with another show that we had planned, which is the Top 10 Conspiracy Theories with Andy Mercer. So I hope you're enjoying it.
And it is the New World Order. The idea that there is some dark power behind all sorts of things happening on the planet, that they're the ones that really control the world around us and not at all us. And the two groups that tend to be blamed for forming or leading or controlling the New World Order are the Illuminati and the Freemasons.
Sure it's not the Conservatives?
They're probably part of the same thing. Two of the many secret societies that are out there. Theorists believe there is a new world order that is going to come into effect and run the world under one worldwide government. Signs like the pyramids and the eye in the American dollar bill are said to be the work of the Illuminati, and Freemasons are behind schemes to take over the world. Well, I'd like to address the two of them specifically for a moment, Freemasons and the Illuminati. I'll start with the latter, the Freemasons. Now, I have 2 brothers-in-law and 2 nephews who are all Freemasons, and they are just a load of people who like to get together and have a few drinks and have a few parties and play lots of golf. They have combined, the 4 of them, know less about Freemason history than I do, and I'm not one of them, although I've been asked to join on more than one occasion. They are just basically a club of people who like to get together and do nice things for charity, mainly. They tend to get together every month, but they also have lots of events and charity raising. You have to be paid more than £200 a year to be a member of the Freemasons, and most of that money then does in fact go to charity, of those who keep the organisation running. But there's no great world conspiracy. I mean, there are occasions when some have tried to use links to other members of the Freemasons to try and get away from minor crimes and speeding tickets, that kind of thing. But most police officers would just laugh at the idea. I mean, there might be members themselves, but they really have no real powerful influence. I mean, certainly the people I know, members of my own family, as I say, I wouldn't trust them to run in a brewery. So I think the idea of the Freemasons being this dark, powerful organisation, I find is a little ridiculous. The other one that's a little more potentially sinister, of course, is the Illuminati. The only real problem with the Illuminati is that it doesn't actually exist at all. The real Illuminati actually were founded around the 1700s in Bavaria, where a small group of noblemen and rich business people who got together for very similar reasons, really, to the idea of the Freemasons get together and sort of have fun and get drunk and do sort of things along those lines. They had no real great power influence over Bavarian government or society, but yet they became, for reasons that I've never really figured out myself, this dark power. Other than the fact that they are kind of linked to a group called the Rosicrucians, again, which are a very real organisation, but are more interested in magic and the occult rather than world domination. They are a sort of spiritualist offshoot of the Freemasons, if you like. And they are two organisations, the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians on the one side and the Illuminati on the other, who kind of came into conflict with each other in the 1800s in Bavaria. But it wasn't long before the Illuminati itself kind of disbanded and was sort of pushed to one side. And the Bavarian government started to crack down on them because they did suspect they were trying to get into politics. But modern writers such as good old David Icke, who would love to come on the show, if we could get him on one day, it would be brilliant, continued to push forward the theory that the Illuminati actually existed in some world power. But of course, linked to his Illuminati theorems is a much more unusual theory, shall we say, which is the reptilian humanoids that control us all. This has to be one of the wackiest theories that ever encountered. I'm just reading from a website at the moment, but I'll go on. Started in 1999 by a book written by David Icke called The Biggest Secret, the book that will change the world. In it, he explains that most world leaders, including quite a few US presidents, are actually shape-shifting reptilian beings from a different planet who start wars and are responsible for horrific events like 9/11 in order to promote fear and hatred, which give them strength. Oh, they're 7 foot tall, apparently, these reptilian humanoids. Now, I don't know of anybody in major government or leadership who are 7 foot tall, but apparently these reptilians are. As silly as it can sound, there's something to be said for learning about conspiracy theories. They can offer a totally different and new perspective on the world events, but that doesn't mean to say they're either real, true, or accurate, and can appear to be ludicrous at times. But there we go. So that's my number 8. World Order is it conspiracy about aliens?
Can I just make a point there that I think there is a third group that's been mentioned as well, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
I can't remember what it's called. Is it the Morgan group or something? All the world heads and everything all get together and...
It gets into the realm of reality. We start talking about the Bilderberg group.
That's the one.
Rich industrialists and business people and large-scale governments.
Yeah.
Now,
I know we've been told that just about every English Prime Minister has been to the Bilderberg group meetings.
Absolutely. There's no reason why they wouldn't do. If you're talking about powerful, rich industrialists around the world getting together, then inviting members of governments around the world to get together to discuss the current political and economic state of the world, then yeah, of course they exist. I'm glad they're doing it. They're trying to get some kind of concerted effort together to right the mess we find ourselves in. But you could say that the banking business, which is one of the things behind the Bilderberg Group, are the ones responsible for the mess we're in now, so they should be the ones clearing it all up. So they exist, certainly, but how much direct power they have over our day-to-day lives, I would be dubious that it's an awful lot. I think it is down to national governments, and one of the problems we have around the world is that national governments don't work together well enough in order to ensure that the economies are running better, running stronger, and are running effective for all those involved in the countries. I mean, I'm not an advocate at all of a euro, of a single currency for Europe, but I do think the way forward for the rest of us is a better united Europe working together to solve the economic difficulties in Europe and not dividing into individual nations. So stuff with UKIP, basically. But yeah, so there are it's when it gets into this darker, more sinister, controlling without power without responsibility. That's the heart of New World Order politics. The claims that these people are acting not in our interest, but only in their own interests. And I find it troubling that I think a lot of it's to do with the idea that we don't think we've got much influence of our own lives, that we feel kind of small and swamped in a bigger world around us, that we have to find reasons for it to be acting strangely, that the things are going wrong around us are like planned in order to bring the secret world government into play. I think more often than not it's just bad economics and not very well informed politicians making pig's ear of things and trying to make things better for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we are but flotsam and in whatever the powers that be decide they want us to do. We don't really have that much of a say in it.
Not really, no. I mean, we have, without getting too deeply into it, we believe we live in a democracy. This is not a democracy. A democracy in the true Greek sense of democracy, ancient Greek sense of democracy, what it actually means is we would be voting regularly on all the major issues. There'd be referendums every couple of months on this big decision, that big decision. That's real democracy, not the once every 5 years putting the old ticker or cross against someone's name. That's not democracy at all. It's we're divorcing our responsibility for our own well-being by giving it to our power to other people to do it for us. It's a republic in the sense of a republic, not in the idea of overthrowing the Queen. It's the idea of a republic in that we send representatives to make decisions for us. We choose them to make decisions for us rather than us making them ourselves, which is what true democracy is. So there you go. Any thoughts, Sue?
No, not really.
No, John.
Sorry.
Waffling on then, shall I?
Yeah, I'm just listening.
Okay, well, conspiracy theory number 7, which... Why is my machine so incredibly slow? There's conspiracy for you.
Well, just while you've been talking, Vectraman has come in. He says sorry he's late. So it's nice to have all these people in the chat room tonight, and as normal. And it's good if you want to get involved and do what Vizzy did and give us a call.
Absolutely, guys. This is a flying by the seat of our pants evening because
yes, because due to connection problems with our scheduled guest, we are talking conspiracy theories with Andy, top 10 conspiracy theories.
And yes, Andy, they are real.
The next one is crop circles. Are they real?
So they are real, but
they are real.
But who did it is another matter.
Who did it?
Yes, that's it. Yes, absolutely. There's the question. I'm going to read a little bit of information here I've come across, which I thought was quite interesting. I read partly for Wikipedia, but also some other stuff I've come across. I'm rapidly researching as I'm talking, so that's why I'm waffling a bit. A crop circle is a sizable pattern created by a flattening of crops such as cereal, rapeseed, reeds, or grass. Such formations typically have intricacy. Pardon me. Have intricacy and beauty. This is really badly written. Oh well. They also refer to them as crop formations because they're not always circular in shape. Sorry, I'm taking the hiccups at the moment. Oh dear. The number of crop circles substantially increased in the 1970s to current time when they first started to really hit the press, hit modern reports. But there have been examples of supposed cross circles going back as early as 1678. When a newspaper reported strange news out of Hertfordshire, which is now more commonly known as the Knowing Devil, which apparently showed in a woodcut, obviously not a photograph, a large circle of crops being flattened down. Now, one wonders if they were all been faked. Were people faking them back as far as then? I don't know. There's also other reports that turned out to be things to do with mushrooms. You get these rings of mushrooms that may well be causing some of the crops to die where the mushrooms were growing. And if you sometimes see in a field like a dark ring in a field, usually about sort of 10, 12 foot across, it's actually caused by mushrooms growing. But the next publication to describe crop circles was published in 1932 in the Essex Notes and Queries by archaeologist C.W. Kirwin. Importantly, this work also contains a photograph and a diagram of the crop circle. The next published description of a crop circle appears in 1963. When well-known astronomer Patrick Moore described several in a field in Wiltshire. Of course, the term crop circle had not been coined yet. With those familiar formations were called just patterns on the ground. The most popularised crop circles of the 1960s occurred around the Australian town of Tully in 1965 and 66, when a number of large circles were found in the weed beds of freshwater lagoons, and they were termed as saucers nests, because the farmer reported seeing a bright light above one of them when he went to investigate and found a circular depression. This contradicts a commonly held belief that the concept of crop circles began in the late 70s when apparent hoaxers, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, began creating the fake sources, the fake crop circles. They said that they were inspired by Tully's saucer nests in Australia, and the farmer found the flattened swamp weeds when after observing a UFO. Since the 1960s, there have been a surge in ufologists in Wiltshire, where the rumours of saucer nests appearing in the area, but they were never photographed. There are other pre-70s reports of circular formations, especially in Australia and Canada, but they were simple circles and could not have been caused by whirlwinds. In the Fortean Times, David Wood reported in the 1940 that the ready-made crop circles were appearing in Gloucestershire. Okay. In 1997, the English Oxford Dictionary recorded the earliest usage of the term crop circles as being in 1988 in the Journal of Meteorology, referring to a BBC film which coined the term crop circle, attributing it to a chap called Colin Andrews, whose name I recognise, but I don't know about him, in the late 70s or early 80s. So there we go, crop circles.
I mean, what gets me with... have you got your sound on, Andy?
Sorry, say again?
You got your sound on?
No, but you are cutting out a bit, as far as I can hear.
We're hearing ourselves come back.
Carry on, Steve.
Okay. What gets me is we got such intricate patterns here.
Yes.
I mean, I'm looking at some of the images.
I've just put on a latest one.
Yeah, and and if these are man-made, these are being done at night. Obviously, without any major lights, otherwise they'd be seen for miles.
Mm.
And they're being done in 12 hours.
Yeah. Now the link I've just put on there is the latest one that was found in Wiltshire, Newton Barrow, reported on the 15th of June, and that is a very good picture, to be honest with you.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks very pretty.
Let me just read you this about the scientific consensus on crop circles. Yeah, that's pretty spectacular, I have to say. But let me just read you what this thing says. The scientific consensus on crop circles is that most or all are constructed by human beings as a prank. The most likely known method for a person or group to conduct a crop circle formation is to tie one end of a rope to an anchor point and the other end to a ball which is used to crush the plants. Skeptics of the paranormal point out that all characteristics of crop circles are fully compatible with this means of hoaxing. Bauer and Chorley, the two guys who both confessed in 1991, were making crop circles, and some people refused to believe them. They deliberately added straight lines and squares to show how it could not be done by natural causes. In a copycat effect, increasingly complex circles started appearing in many countries around the world, including fractal figures. Well, that's drying up. Physicists have suggested that the most complex formations might be made with the help of GPS and lasers. It makes entire sense. In 2009, a crop circle formation was made over the course of 3 consecutive nights and was apparently left unfinished with some half-made circles. The main criticism of the alleged non-human creation of crop circles is that while evidence of these origins, besides eyewitness testimonies, is essentially the absence, and some definitely known to be... Oh, sorry, I'm not making sense there. Essentially absent. Let me try it again. The main criticism of alleged non-human creation of crop circles is that while evidence of these origins, besides witness testimonies, is essentially absent, some are definitely known to be the work of human pranksters. Figure things such as the Firefox logo is one example that's been seen in the field in America a couple of times.
Yeah.
Why would aliens be making the Firefox logo on the ground?
No, this is it.
He wrote about. So, yes, I won't read the whole rest of this because it's actually quite lengthy. Some crop circles are paid for by companies to use them as advertising.
Yeah. Well, Viscount says a lot of the symbols seen in crop circles are scientific numerology, what is beyond most people's understanding, and some from space movies. Why give us information that we don't understand? And Dave Lloyd said some crop circles are not man-made.
Don't know. I'm not convinced that any of them aren't, apart from possibly the very early ones. I mean, I've got the image of the mowing devil one here. I'll try and put it on the screen if I can.
Dave seems to think that some are made by balls of light.
Well, there is a video that's been bouncing around YouTube for a number of years that apparently seems to show two lights spinning above the ground and then the pattern appearing on the ground afterwards. But that's been debunked as being completely fake. In fact, the person who apparently faked it has come forward and admitted they faked it.
Right, okay.
With fairly early computer graphics. We're talking about the 1980s, I think this one was.
Yeah.
Fairly early computer graphics. I've got, let me just put this up. This is the thing I was just talking about. This is the Mowing Devil, which, funny enough, I built a book fairly recently of sort of tales of the paranormal, if you like, and it included a chapter on both the footprints that I've seen across Devon at one point and the Mowing Devil, which unfortunately, of course, we are definitely having real problems with technology today because now it doesn't want to show me the answers.
I know, it's weird. I don't see it. No, what the problem is, the Viscount was asking, he could hear running water. He wondered whether you were taking a bath.
No. We're reporting live.
Or whether you were talking from the bathroom, so...
Well, you are definitely not. Let's have a go. No, that doesn't work. So what's going on here? Oh, give up. Right, let's try again. Okay, let me just look that bit. I'm going to show you this because I've decided to go to. This is the eponymous Mowing Devil.
Right.
It does beg the question, if this wasn't created by pranksters,
yeah,
the Mowing Devil, strange news, being a true relation of a farmer who bargaining with poor mower about the cutting down of tree.
The page is not directing properly.
Oh, blimey, that's the big one. It works for me. Try again.
Try again, and it says problem loading page.
Oh, for crying out loud, I'll give up. Anyway, it just says a woodcut image and the Mowing Devil. It's the cover of this newspaper from the 1600s, so we'll leave it at that. But yeah, so less than wholly convinced about the idea of crop circles. Now, all the conspiracies on the list I've got, both the ones we've covered and the ones to come, I knew about and read about and found quite fascinating. This one was new to me until I did a bit of research, and I found it quite fascinating.
Okay.
Is Paul McCartney dead?
Again?
Yeah.
This has been going on for ages.
Well, it was new to me.
Is it really?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a major Beatles fan, so it wouldn't necessarily mean an awful lot to me.
Apparently, right, it's got something to do with back in the day. There was something to do with a thing that Ringo did, I think it was.
Well, recently, Ringo's meant to have come out and actually said that the Paul McCartney that we know isn't Paul McCartney.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be like a lookalike or something.
I think he was rather pulling our leg. Let's read this to you anyway. I've actually watched a program that came, a video or DVD thing that came out a while ago. The Mowing Devil. Yes, someone put a link up for it. Well done. Who's that? Oh, well done, Steve. That's it. That's the Mowing Devil. Yeah, basically, let me just read this to you. Paul is dead. It's an urban legend alleging that Paul McCartney died in a car crash in 1966 and was replaced by a lookalike and sound-alike. Evidence, quotation marks, for Paul McCartney's death consists of clues found among the Beatles' many recordings. Hundreds have been cited at various times by various people. They include statements allegedly heard when a song is played backwards, symbolism found in obscure lyrics and ambiguous imagery on album covers. A few of them are well known, such as the fact that Paul McCartney is the only barefooted Beatle in the and is out of step with the others on the Abbey Road album cover. Now, having read a bit of this in the week, I actually tracked down a couple of videos, including a full-length feature film, basically, called Paul is Really Dead, the George Harrison tapes, which purports to be George Harrison making a deathbed admission that the Paul McCartney was dead. Now, what happened was, I don't know if you know, but in 1999, I think it was, George Harrison was attacked in his home and was stabbed several times. And he thought he was actually going to die. Both the doctors and he thought he was going to die. And he apparently made these recordings whilst he was in hospital, thinking he had probably only days to live. As you know, of course, he did survive that, and unfortunately died of cancer a few years later. But these recordings have apparently been sent in 2005 to an American TV and film company. And the film I watched purports to be George Harrison's basically rather long-winded story about what actually happened. The only trouble is the bloke sounds actually nothing like George Harrison. In fact, his Liverpool accent is pretty dreadful, so it's certainly not convincing at all. But the guy who made it admits they made the recordings up, but he wants to put forward this theory that what happened was during a period of music writing, just after they'd had their world tour, which had caused a few problems. I don't know if you know about this, probably do actually, in which John Lennon claimed they were more popular than Jesus, and there was a bit of a backlash, particularly in the deep south of America and other more religious countries around the world, that took rather great umbrage to this suggestion. And they had quite a bit of difficulty with a lot of countries because of these statements he'd made.
Yeah.
Now, John completely retracted the statement, so it was just sort of a meaningless statement, but unfortunately he then made other statements that were similarly as inflammatory. So what the official story was that after the 1966 World Tour, they decided they weren't going to tour anymore and were simply going to just do studio work and, of course, the films they made. Now, the real quotation mark reasons for this decision to stop touring was to do with Paul McCartney apparently dying in this car crash. The story went that in early hours, I think it was August 1966, they were writing some new material, and Paul and John got into a bit of an argument about the sort of general direction the Beatles were going in, whereas John wanted to make it more serious, more sort of deep thinking music, whereas Paul recognised they were basically a pop band and should carry on producing pop songs. Apparently they were all high on LSD at the time, stripping their heads off, and Paul stormed out the studio at the early hours of the morning and basically drove off. Now, apparently the story goes, let's have a quick drink. He was driving along and the rain was lashing down, it was a very wet night, and a young girl was clearly hitching a lift. Now, being a nice person, Paul McCartney stopped the car and allowed the girl to get in the car, and said, like, I'll give you a lift, where are you going? At that point, the girl recognised who he was and went rather silly and started trying to grab him and hug him and all that kind of stuff. It's apparently what the girl herself said afterwards. And the car, he lost control of the car in the rain. It skidded, hit a lamppost and turned upside down, and she was thrown out of the car before it burst into flames. The story goes that a couple of hours after this had happened, the Beatles, the other three Beatles, were in the studio and MI5 turned up. They said that something serious had happened, that they needed to identify a body, in which they were taken to the site, and the body bag was open, and they clearly identified Paul McCartney, who apparently, so this is a little bit graphic, but it is relevant, his head was split open, he lost one eye, most of his skin of his side of his face had been torn off and was burnt, and teeth were showing through, to which one of the MI5 agents joked, "You look like a walrus." Now, "I Am a Walrus" is a lyric, of course, and the name of a song that popped up a few years later, so there's kind of links to this idea of the tooth sticking out. Anyway, the other three Beatles, obviously in absolute shock and horror at what had happened, decided between them that there were partly that they themselves realised how big and popular a band they were, but also MI5 were very concerned that if a death of a Beatle had got out to the world in general, there'd be mass suicides, because of course they were absolutely loved and adored by millions of fans around the world, and they were worried about the general reaction to a dead Beatle. So there was a competition. Now the competition itself does exist, and this is the interesting thing. There's lots of bits and pieces in this story that you think, hang on a minute, that's a bit strange. But anyway, there was actually a competition that was planned to find a Paul McCartney lookalike. The competition was actually organised in America, although people from the UK will also enter the competition. Now, there was never any finalist or winner of the competition ever announced, but the competition was apparently planned. So that's interesting. But according to the conspiracy theory, a chap called, what was his name? William Sears Campbell, Scottish guy, won the competition, who had more than a passing look of Paul McCartney. And what happens over the next couple of years is a series of plastic surgery work was carried out by sort of the world's top plastic surgeons to make this guy now look like Paul McCartney. In the meantime, the rest of the Beatles were told by the MI5 to basically keep quiet about what had really happened, to continue making music, and not to tell anybody of the truth that Paul McCartney really was dead and this was a lookalike replacing him. But the story goes that there are all sorts of clues and images and secrets hidden within both lyrics, normal lyrics, and of course the old good old-fashioned backwards playing records. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go through all of them because there were loads and loads of them, and some of them you listen to and you think, well, maybe there's something being said now. There's one particular backwards recording I heard which is quite interesting, which apparently it says, Paul is dead, man, I miss him, miss him, miss him, and that's John Lennon saying it quite clearly in the backwards recording.
Yeah.
There's another one which is a song called Revolution Number 9, and when it's played backwards, the number 9 is said in quite an odd way forwards, and when played backwards it sounds like he is a dead man. He is a dead man. It's weird. Again, there are strange images. It is an old sort of Far Eastern symbol of a man's hand above someone's head to denote they are dead. And there are dozens of images of Paul McCartney, both in real photographs and the drawings that were on the Earth submarine, where appear to have John Lennon's hand above his head quite a few different times, which is supposedly denoting that he was dead. The actual film I watched goes even further than that. They claim that the reasons why the Beatles went to India in the late 60s, they met Maharaji Reed to tell them about transcendental meditation, was to also see if the spirit of Paul McCartney could possess the guy that had replaced him, the William Campbell. And William Campbell's name was apparently William Shears Campbell. And there is a song that mentions someone called Billy Shears. And apparently, that if you change the letters around it, it says Billy's here, as in this is Billy, not Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the general thrust of it. And the reason why Paul McCartney, the reason why John Lennon was shocked was because he was about to reveal the truth about Paul McCartney not being Paul McCartney. And they actually pointed out that Paul McCartney's reaction to the death of John Lennon was a bit strange. When he was first told about it, he was reporting, you see it live on camera, saying, oh, that's a bit of a drag. It's like, this guy was his lifelong, music event. Okay, they had fallen out and weren't getting on very well, but they worked together for absolute years. And his reaction was that of someone who just didn't seem all that bothered, which, again, was a bit of a strange one. But you think if they're going to kill anybody after the Beatles finished, it would have been Paul McCartney, you know? And there are other odd things. I mean, there's one thing I actually put on my Facebook page, which I'd never noticed before until I had a look myself. On one of the Beatles albums, which is known as the White Album, which basically is the white outer cover, there are a series of sort of candid photographs. And in the bottom left-hand corner, there's what appears to be a kind of photograph you get from a photo booth of a man in glasses, which, I mean, it looks a bit like Paul McCartney, but I wouldn't say for a second it was Paul McCartney. And of course, the conspiracy theory is that is actually William Shears before surgery. William Campbell, rather, before surgery, being slipped into the imagery by John Lennon. Apparently John Lennon was the main responsible for most of this, trying to sneak out the information that Paul McCartney really was dead and this was a replacement, because they wanted to say, well, look, if it ever came out that he really was dead and this is what's been going on, he could say, look, we tried to tell you, but the MI5 wouldn't let us, so we put all these clues and hints in. So there you go, that's the conspiracy of that one. But the funny one that really made the program I watched fall to pieces was that Rita, the girl that Paul McCartney apparently picked up that night, was a young girl who they paid off lots of money to keep quiet. They changed the name and identity. Years later, she got in contact with Paul McCartney and demanded, the fake Paul McCartney demanded even more money. And they had already changed the name once, and they agreed to let her marry him to get more money. So there's a way of getting it. And the woman's name had been changed to Heather Mills. And of course, you know the story about Heather Mills. And the problem was, in 1966, Heather Mills was 2 years old. So they kind of got their research a bit wrong on that one.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Kind of made the program fall apart. But obviously, Sue, you know something about this. You've obviously heard of it before. So can you elucidate me on what you know?
Well, basically, just as what you've just told me, they were going on about the fact that there's a conspiracy that Paul is dead and this, that and the other.
Yeah,
and
the competition was supposed to have actually happened before he died, and he was picked up from that afterwards. But a couple of things bother me. The big red flag being the MI5. Why would MI5 turn out to a car crash?
The story goes that when the police who first arrived at the crash identified the car, it was definitely Paul McCartney's own car. So, of course, they obviously alerted higher authorities when that was discovered.
Right, I see.
I don't think so,
I don't know, but
Well,
as I say, there was also something to do with the number plate, I think, as well.
Yeah, it's on Abbey Road. It's 28IF.
Yeah.
The reference is that he would have been 28 if it had been true.
Yeah.
But the album cover, obviously the Abbey Road one, which if you aren't familiar with it, again, where have you been all these years? But secondly, it shows the four of them dressed up, walking across a crossing outside the Abbey Road studios. Now, what's been pointed out was, if you look at the image, you got John Lennon at the front dressed in white, suggesting some kind of sort of angel or godlike figure. Directly behind him, walking along, is... I'm having visitation with my wife all of a sudden. Say hello.
Hello.
Walking directly behind him is Ringo Starr dressed in black, like a funeral director or undertaker. You then have Paul McCartney walking in what is described as being a rather old, out-of-date, double-breasted suit. He's walking out of stride with the rest of them and barefooted, claiming that he's the corpse. Now, one programme I did listen to made me laugh that said that apparently that we in England bury people without their shoes on. That apparently is fact, which I thought was interesting, which is complete nonsense. Some American reporter said that. And then you've got behind him George Harrison's dressed in denim, and they're saying that he's the grave digger, dressed just in denim and trainers. The trouble, one of the other biggest problems was there was no car crash in 1966 involving Paul McCartney or Paul McCartney's car.
No.
He did crash his car, as I think Viscount put this up, but he did crash his car in 1967, but wasn't injured. It was just a minor crash.
Dave Lloyd is saying, I was asking, what is your opinion? Is Paul still alive? The real Paul?
To be honest with you, I personally speaking, I can't stand the man. I have to be honest. I quite like the Beatles' music, but I do not like Paul McCartney at all. I think he's incredibly vain. Look at his hair. Very arrogant person. And I do think there are people around him who make sure he's always presented in the best light. And I think some of it drove poor Heather Mills halfway around the bend. I genuinely think she was given that much grief by his associates that she really did have to become mentally ill. But no, I think wholeheartedly it's definitely him. Again, I mean, you can compare images, and this programme has got a few images compared. But if you take photographs of people at different angles, you can make them look quite different to each other. But no, I think, to me, the obvious thing that would have suggested it was true was as soon as the Beatles split up, kill him. Get rid of him. Why would he still be alive? Why kill John Lennon, who was about to reveal the truth about Paul McCartney, and not Paul McCartney? He's the only one of the two people that's still left alive. And the idea was in the programme was that because the idea was being floated again that the truth about Paul McCartney was going to be revealed, that George Harrison was, the MI5 tried to kill George Harrison. That stabbing was actually MI5 trying to kill him. But again, why have they not tried to kill Paul McCartney?
Because I know why they didn't try and kill Paul McCartney.
Go on.
Because it was Paul McCartney that hired the guy that killed John Lennon. Because he was about to tell everybody.
I think the information suggested there may be something to this story, says the Viscount. Be careful what you say. The show is being listened to.
Higher forces.
My higher forces, you have been warned.
I mean, if you're going to follow the conspiracy through, the one person that wouldn't want it out is Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, yes, he's been interviewed and addressed it directly on a number of occasions as just a bit of a joke. But apparently it was started by an American radio show host who first heard and noticed these backward recordings. Now, whether he was tipped off by somebody else or he found it himself, I don't know. But a lot of it springs from that. Prior to 1969, when the stories began to surface, there was no rumour, no story, no myth, nothing about Paul McCartney being dead. It all started then and it's carried on ever since. But
I mean, I hear these stories about backward playing music. Who in their right mind is going to put a record on a record player and play it backwards?
Only if they're told to.
Exactly.
Again, see, lots of people have done it since these stories have come up, and most people have learnt the lyrics.
Was
and
it the AC/DC one that was...
No, I think it was Black Sabbath.
Was it Sabbath that was meant to say the Lord's Prayer backwards or something when you did it?
Something like that. I don't know. One of them were.
A lot of them have been claimed. I mean, there are real ones these days. You've deliberately been made on purpose. But of course, in the days of CD, that was impossible to play them backwards anyway. It's only recently, again, you can now do that because they're MP3s. You can just reverse an MP3 on any sort of things like Audacity or any painful audio program. You can actually turn it backwards and hear there's anything on there. But it's the pareidolia of the ear, basically.
Yeah.
You know, half these things, you listen to them until someone tells you what they think they're hearing. You haven't got a clue. But as soon as they tell you, you can hear it. You know, it really is. It's the human brain trying to find understandable sounds in just random noise.
It's funny about that. I was listening to, talking about pareidolia, I was listening to David Rowntree interview, and he was mentioning that about some of these, what's it called? White noise stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Your ear is actually giving you the idea of what you're supposed to be hearing.
Of course, absolutely.
You know? So it's down to pareidolia.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I don't take any stock in those devices that sort of play random stations or random air. I want to hear all the EVPs, you know, I've played on the show, are of actual voices being recorded at the time. They're not sort of radio broadcasts, they're actual voices in the room or nearby.
Okay, so what's your next one then, Andy?
Someone's already preempted it a little bit earlier on.
That was David.
Yeah, the next one is, did we go to the moon?
Everyone's gone to the moon.
I think this will definitely be a show, complete show, on its own at some point, because there's so much to this one.
Yes.
I had a bit of fun with a friend of mine when I was teaching training a couple of years back. He was training to be a science teacher, and he's very scientifically oriented. He's interested in UFOs and phenomena like that. And I was used to wind up and sort of claiming all sorts of strange things. And I actually said to him that, no, we didn't go to the moon. And he said, what are you talking about? Of course we did. I said, no, we didn't. We did not go to the moon. He said, we did, absolutely. And he put this bit of evidence, that bit of evidence. I kept saying to him, no, we never went to the moon. And I left it for a day or two, and we'd have another conversation or so. I said, no, I kept saying, we did not ever go to the moon. And he was getting really frustrated with me. He said, with all this evidence, you know, these rocks, these photographs. And I said to him, Carl, when did you go to the moon? When were you walking on the moon? Ah, okay. I said, that's what I said. I said, you and me, we've not been to the moon. He got rather annoyed at that point. Kept there for quite some time. Anyway, let me just read this to you.
So you was being rather annoying.
Oh, absolutely, yes. We are definitely going to have a proper show on this topic because it's huge and I find it absolutely fascinating. But let me just briefly summarise it in a moment. 1969, moon landing didn't happen. We faked the moon landing. The theory has been debunked, but there are still a few ardent followers out there. Now, I won't read that one because that one's talking nonsense. Although NASA has ousted all claims that the moon landings were fake, theorists believe that it was staged because NASA desperately wanted the glory of being the first man on the moon, because basically the Russians had won every other stage of the space race. They were the first to get an object into space. They were the first to get a manned craft into space. First to launch a satellite into space. So the one that was left that NASA hoped to beat the Russians to was walking on the moon. So that was the problem. However, we have video footage apparently showing the moon landings taking place with Louis Armstrong then, Neil Armstrong even, Louis Armstrong's on the moon, Neil Armstrong on the moon, and Buzz Aldrin with him, and I forget the name of the guy who just floating up in the space shuttle, who never actually came, in the capsule that never came down. But there are loads of people and theories that claim none of it really happened, that it was all fake.
Okay, so that's going to be a show in itself.
Well,
I think so, yeah.
Well, I'd like to point out a couple of things.
Yes, I'm going to.
But first of all, if we didn't go to the moon, i.e. the Yanks, Neil Armstrong and all the rest of it, not me and you.
Yes, yeah. Those guys.
The Russians would be the first ones to shout, because you can guarantee they were monitoring it.
Absolutely.
And if it's all about prestige, then especially in a time of the Cold War, they're not going to let the Yanks get away with that.
No.
Never in a million years will they let the Yanks get away with that.
Unless they were fooled as well.
No, I doubt it.
Yeah.
The problem we have is that the pictures they're showing us are not right.
Yes.
There's
now,
stuff
you're not
wrong
talk-
with them.
previously, there are all sorts of problems with the video and photographic footage, which is what we were going to talk about in a moment, that leave you wondering something's wrong, something's amiss. I mean, there are one particular photograph that always strikes me, and I heard it on a program, was the one that apparently shows Neil Armstrong being photographed by Buzz Aldrin, full spacesuit in front of him. Now you can clearly see the sun is to his upper right, upper left, sorry, as looking at it, and yet the spacesuit that Armstrong is wearing is fully illuminated from the front. Now the man who designed the chest-mounted camera that was used to take these photographs, upon seeing that photograph, said he couldn't explain how this photograph was taken. It would have to have had a front light illuminating Armstrong, yet there were no such lights, no flashes on the cameras, no such lights were taken up there. So he was an absolute loss. He should be in darkness and shadow because the sun's behind him. Yes, this suit is highly reflective, and one possibility that was put forward was that it is the sun reflecting off of Aldrin's suit illuminating Armstrong. But again, he said that is possible for some lighting, but this is far too well lit and bright. Also pointed out that when Armstrong first steps down from the lunar module onto the surface of the moon and says the one small step for man line, again he appears to be illuminated. He should also again be in shadow, but yet there is no shadow. And the other one that Dave Lloyd has pointed out, which is quite important point, is the Van Allen belt. One of the reasons why the Russians decided not to attempt a moon landing is because of what's called the Van Allen belt, which is a belt of high radiation that surrounds the Earth, that protects it from the sun's ultraviolet rays. It is deadly. You can't spend very much time in it at all, and the amount of time it would take to traverse the Van Allen belt, according to the theories, would have killed anybody in a spaceship like that. There was a program on a couple of years ago where they were talking about mission to Mars, where they were discussing the problems that we face today with transversing the Van Allen belt. And someone picked up and put it on YouTube. Well, what the hell are they talking about? Because according to the official theory of moon landings, they've already figured out how to get through the Van Allen belt. And yet these people are talking about a Mars mission and having to deal with the Van Allen belt problem. Well, why don't you just use what you used 40 odd years ago? And somebody else pointed out that if the spacesuits that are supposed to have protected them that were that good, why were they not using things like the 3 Mile Island back in the 70s or Chernobyl in the 80s to sort of deal with the nuclear explosions there? But they wouldn't go near them. So you wonder, have they somehow suddenly forgotten how to protect the spacesuits and the astronauts from the Van Allen belt? So that in itself is a little bit puzzling.
Yeah, Dave Lloyd's just put up that Stanley Kubrick paid to make the first official moon landing on a giant film set.
Yes, he's adamantly and categorically denied any of that. He's again towards the end of his life, he made it absolutely categorically clear that no such plan was ever conceived or involved him in any way, shape, or form. Now, you and I think, are of a similar mind to that. Van Allen belt problem aside, the most likely explanation of real conspiracy involving moon landing is the videos and the photographs. That they may well be fake. That they may have had to fake them because, again, the Van Allen belt may well have destroyed the recording equipment, because obviously it's quite sensitive film and camera film, either on the way out through the Van Allen belt by high radiation or the way back through the Van Allen belt, again through high radiation. That they realised they had no evidence other than a couple of stones to prove they were on the moon. Therefore, they set out to create the photographs and video footage. I will show the stuff I've got when we do a proper show on this topic.
Yeah, because I mean, as well as that, they put a lot of it on telly, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, some of it is
supposed to be live.
Oh, there are certain problems, like they're saying about, well, why the hash marks disappear on certain images? So they're hash, like cross marks are scratched onto the lens. Sometimes you can't see them. That's because it's photographed something that's white. But anyway, we'll come on to that. But there's a couple of bits of video footage that particularly fascinate me. There's one or two pieces of footage that are apparently filmed 3 miles apart, and yet they show exactly the same landscape. The mountains in the background, hills in the background are identical. There is one photograph that shows the lunar module in situ with a range of hills behind, and another photograph showing exactly the same spot without the lunar module. Now, there's no way that photograph could be taken and the new module will be moved. Obviously, there was no one there before it landed, and there was no one there after it that took off. But yet, this photograph show it, and then show exactly the same scene without it, and it doesn't move. You can't move it, obviously not.
Yeah,
So they are photographs that. Barkin's asking for the link. You have to wait to the proper show, then I'll show you.
Yes, more of the proper show.
Yes,
What's the next one then?
Okay, another one that's not really paranormal. I suppose the Moonland is not paranormal, but it tends to feature in those kind of channels. But this one has resurfaced recently because of a photograph that popped up. But I certainly have severe doubts about this one.
Okay.
And it is: did Hitler survive World War II?
There's been more talk about that recently.
Yes, quite a bit of
Yes. Funny enough, we were talking about it only a couple of days ago. Now, the official story is that on the last day of April, I think it's 31st or 30th, 1945, Hitler married his longtime mistress Eva Braun and then promptly committed suicide. He, by shooting himself and swallowing cyanide at the same time to make absolutely certain, and her swallowing cyanide. Now, what happens next is a little bit garbled and a little bit confused. There are photographs apparently showing Hitler's body a couple of, literally within hours of dying. One that was quite a famous one that shows him lying down, mouth open, eyes closed, moustache, obviously visible, and a photograph, one of those classic sort of Hitler images, with being put on top of him saying this is Hitler. That was later identified to have been one of the many doubles that Hitler had around him, so obviously to sort of protect him, that this guy was one of the doubles and wasn't Hitler at all. What appears to have happened was that the Soviets actually took the body away once they got into the bunker a few days later. The body was never moved, it was simply left there, because quite a few of the fellow German officers committed suicide at the same sort of time or fled. And he was then taken to an East German town whose name I've completely forgotten off the top of my head, where the body was identified as being that of Hitler, and Eva Braun was then burnt, basically, covered in petrol and set fire to, burning most of the body away. The small bits that remained were buried in an unmarked grave, not even a graveyard, actually close to a graveyard, unmarked and unrecorded. Were left there until the 1950s, when they were actually dug up because the rumours already had begun, possibly partly started by Stalin, actually, that he was still alive in order for the Soviets to continue their very, very tight control of Eastern Europe, claiming that perhaps Hitler might be alive and trying to plan something, so they had to keep sure all their forces were kept in place. That he may well have been one of the people that started off the rumour that Hitler wasn't dead. But anyway, the body was dug up in the 1950s, and what remained was not a lot. Most of it had been burnt to sort of crisp, turned to ashes. But parts of his jaw had survived, partly because there was a lot of dental work, and the metal had melted into the bone. Obviously, metal doesn't burn. It melted into the bone and actually protected the bone, and also a large portion of his skull, which included an apparent bullet hole. Now, they apparently identified the skull fragment as being Hitler's, but also through DNA methods, but also the jawbone through DNA, but also Hitler's dentist was alive still, and he identified both his own dental work, Hitler's dental records, and then compared them to the records, to the physical jawbone they found, and concluded categorically this is the jawbone of Hitler. He definitely died, and was buried for a while in, I think it was Mannheim, I forget the name of the town, but it was in now what was then East Germany, back in Germany of course itself, and that was what actually happened. As I say, part of the possible myth of him surviving may well have been started by Stalin and co. But the story goes that, in actual fact, it was one of Hitler's doubles that was married Eva Braun and was shot. That he was surreptitiously sneaked out to a waiting aeroplane which used the main Berlin Boulevard roadway, the name of the Strasse, which was being used as a makeshift runway, and was flown out literally as the Russians were approaching, was flown away and taken to South America. Now, there are a number of problems with this. Hitler, by 1945, was very ill. He had advanced Parkinson's. In fact, the last video or film footage that shows him talking to a bunch of very, very young German soldiers protecting the city shows his hand visibly shaking. So Parkinson's was getting quite bad by that point. He was on a number of different medications, including powerful painkillers and morphiates for his jaw, actually, because so much work had been done that they said he would have been in permanent agony from the bridge work that had been rather hastily done for him towards the end of 45, or towards the end of 44. So he would have been unlikely to have lived more than 10 years at maximum after the Second World War, because of just the damage. I mean, obviously we know about the fact that it was almost blown up. Unfortunately, it failed in the attempt to assassinate him in 44, but that left him not only physically ill and physically injured, but psychologically even more damaged than he already was. So, the chances are the guy would have completely lost his marbles. I mean, incoherently lost his marbles, and it wouldn't have lasted very long, despite the fact there's images and photographs supposedly showing him right up to the 1990s. And it's one of those strange things. There is a dark angle to all of this. Obviously, some neo-Nazis would like the idea that their beloved leader did survive and did in fact escape. Partly because they don't like the idea that he would have done something as cowardly as committed suicide, and partly because they want to believe that their great leader was almost superhuman, would survive anything. But the fact that this guy sort of hid in the bunker and then shot himself, and he's either shot himself or shot herself. I don't know which. No one knows. No one was actually in the room at the time, although the shots were certainly heard. And Hitler's main valet went in, was the first to identify. Yes, Hitler was definitely very dead. He's got a bullet hole in his head, and there's cyanide in his mouth. So he had committed suicide and shot himself, making absolutely sure of the job. So there you go. But it's a persistent rumour, persistent story that Hitler somehow survived World War II.
Yeah, because apparently the other story was that from the plane they went to Spain, and from Spain they went into a submarine to Argentina.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, where he's supposed to have lived. One of his greatest feelings of letdown, so to speak, was that Churchill outlived him. But he's supposed to have had 2 daughters.
Yes, I think you're looking at the same Mail Online page I'm looking at the moment, I suspect.
Yeah, and as Dave Lloyd has said on here, very controversially, that Angela Merkel is said to be one of them.
I don't think so. In fact, there was an interesting programme on a couple of years back, this has always fascinated me, that the members of the Hitler line made a pact together to end the family line. There was a decision made because he had a younger sister, a half sister, and there was a niece. And the niece, there was a couple of nieces, one of which actually he was very, very fond of, Gaelic, and she committed suicide. And we don't really know why, but it's been suggested that he had certain sexual deviances that he liked to practice on women. But certainly his remaining cousins of the same name decided that they wouldn't have children. They changed their names and wouldn't have any direct children following on from Hitler. So the immediate Hitler family, or Schickeldruber, to give him an original name, would not survive. So not only did Hitler have no children, he probably only had one testicle, which has the effect of making men usually impotent. So he probably couldn't have children.
So there was something to the song then.
That was the weird thing. It was actually an incredible coincidence, because the examination made by the Soviets after he died, and medical records that were recovered, strongly suggested, even though he tried to lose some of the records, that he didn't have one ball.
Yeah, I mean, talking about one of his nieces, there was a rumour that he had a child with one of his nieces.
Well, Gaelic is the niece, and as far as I know, it's story, rumour, and there's no truth to it. She says she committed suicide living in his house. She was, again, don't really know why. And one of the stories was that she was actually having an affair with his driver, and that the driver was sent off to the Russian front, basically, and she committed suicide. A loss of him and the violence and abuse she got from Hitler made her decide to commit suicide. But as I say, no one really knows, because no one could get close to his immediate family. He kept them very well protected from any press, of course, in Germany, because they controlled all the press. And outside that, no one had a chance. So
right, so what's the next one then?
Okay, next one is the granddaddy of, we're into the top three now,
Top 3. Da-da-da-da.
of UFOs. Of course, it has to be none other than Roswell.
Roswell.
What can we say about Roswell? What can we say about Roswell? It's already been bloody said. Really, it's one of the.
Not a lot, really.
It's kind of the UFO's super daddy, isn't it? It's the big one. It's the one that kind of covers everything. Let me have a read of what I've come across here, just very briefly. When ranch manager Mark Brazil came across crash debris near his property in 1947, he did not know what to make of it. He alerted local authorities that same day. The Roswell airfield sent out a press release stated that a flying disc had been found. Later it was retracted by the US military and was told that the fallen object was in fact a weather balloon. The slip sparked a huge controversy, and theories abound that the government had attempted to cover up a UFO alien existence. Some even say that alien bodies were found in the crash. Now the story that the balloon is part of Project Mogul, if I can say it correctly, which was the government's attempt to pick up on Soviet Union nuclear tests, and as a result, a very large balloon was set into very high atmosphere, and unfortunately, it burst. And Roswell has become the big tourist attraction for extraterrestrial enthusiasts. Now, of course, the story itself has had so many different variations, twists and tales and turns and all sorts of things. The standard original weather balloon story, which has become the joke, of course, of all explanations for any kind of UFOs, has been that whatever it is, it's a weather balloon. It's definitely a weather balloon, no matter what I say, it's a weather balloon. One of the other theories that I came across a few years back I thought was quite fascinating was the idea that it was actually part of the Apollo moon plan. It was actually trying to get moon rockets to, create rockets that could fly to the moon, certainly leave our atmosphere. Interestingly enough, this now links back to our previous story about Hitler surviving. Although we know definitely Hitler didn't survive, quite a number of the Nazi scientists were smuggled out of Germany and ended up in America as part of what was called Project Paperclip, which again was rumoured to be a false story, a nonsense conspiracy that has proven to be absolutely true.
Viscount says Roswell really did happen. Fact. Remember when he phoned in earlier on in the show and mentioned the American bloke, right, who said he was part of the investigating team? Yeah. He said, why would he want to lie to me? He was in his 70s.
Well, this comes back to what I think could be a more probable explanation of what was really happening. As I mentioned already, a number of Nazi scientists who were working on, because they were actually working on their own nuclear bomb, which they reckon was probably 6 to 9 months away from being ready to launch when the war ended. They were that bloody close. Thank God Americans got there first. One of them was Werner von Braun, who went on to be part of the first Saturn rocket project, and then later on the Apollo rocket project. But what you might have had was that they were testing a rocket with either chimpanzees on it or dummy humans on it, that it then went out, it took off, went out of control and crashed into the area of Roswell. And what the alien bodies actually were either monkeys, who've obviously been burnt very badly, or dummies that contained equipment that was measuring the effect of their flight. So I think that's possible, that it will be highly secretive. They wouldn't want to admit that they were testing these rockets out in the desert, that it could well have been one of these test vehicles that the average American soldier wouldn't have recognised and would have no idea was going on. So it was highly top secret, these 1950s tests. But there were a number of tests carried out in the late 40s of some equipment that had been taken from Nazi Germany, and others had been reconstructed by the Nazi technicians who built them in the first place. Because, of course, they were building the V2 rocket, which is basically what they were testing. It was the world's first rocket with a guidance system in it, and they were working on the V3, which potentially would have carried nuclear material around the time the war ended. So I personally think that is the most likely explanation of Roswell. It was highly top secret equipment that the average Joe in the army, indeed people at Roswell military base, probably wouldn't have known about.
Yeah, but wouldn't they, on investigation, wouldn't these people have realised that they were monkeys by their mandibles and everything?
I've no idea. I couldn't answer that question. I wasn't there.
The skeletons and stuff?
Well, they probably would, but if the armed forces picked them up.
Well, if you're talking about...
Then they're going to be told to keep shut.
We're talking about small humanoid figures,
Yeah.
badly burnt. It does leave you wondering, doesn't it? I've never tried taking a chimpanzee and setting him on fire to his hair burnt off, but you could explain a chimpanzee or it wasn't chimps they were using. It was a different monkey whose name escapes me. I can't remember. I can picture one of them, but I can't remember. Anyway, we don't know what one would look like with all its hair burnt off. Why the average soldier would think, well, why on earth are we putting monkeys in a spaceship? It's got to be a human or is it an alien? It's one of those things. It's a problem story because there are very few people left. I mean, all respect to Viscount, I know he's a 70-plus-year-old man, but how do we know he wasn't making it up?
Okay, right. So what's next?
Okay.
It's got to be JFK, isn't it?
Ooh! And it doesn't require letters, it just requires 3 numbers. And it is...
911.
Now, of course, we are going to be doing a show on this in September, myself versus Ben, who was on last 2 weeks ago. We're going to go into much more detail about the 9/11 events. But let's very briefly cover what actually is known to have happened. September the 11th, to approximately 9:15 in the morning. I've seen the forward page. I've just accidentally closed the bloody page I was looking at.
I remember actually seeing it on the television, and I saw the second one go through.
You actually saw it?
I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Absolutely.
And then I actually saw the collapse of the buildings, and it was horrendous.
It was really bad to watch.
It was. We had separate rooms then, office-wise, and I went, Steve, get your backside in here. Look, what the hell's going on? Is this actually happening? And it had already hit the first one. I didn't see it hit the first one, but then all of a sudden, oh my God, there's another plane, and it went through.
I mean, the problem with 9/11, the only thing we know for certain is that something exploded into the towers.
Yeah.
And they collapsed.
Yes.
Let me just read this to you.
That's the only thing that's absolutely certain. Everything else seems to be up in the air.
Okay, then what you got to say then, Andy?
This is almost the standard version of events. September the 11th, 2001, at 8:45 a.m. on a clear Tuesday morning, an American Airlines Boeing 767 loaded with 20,000 gallons of jet fuel crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The impact left a gaping, burning hole near the 80th floor, the 110th floor skyscraper, instantly killing hundreds of people and trapped thousands more in the higher floors. As the evacuation of the tower and its twin got underway, television cameras broadcasted live images of what initially appeared to be a freak accident. Then, 18 minutes later, after the first plane hit, a second Boeing 767 United Airlines Flight 175 appeared out of the sky, turned sharply towards the World Trade Center and sliced into the South Tower near the 60th floor. The collision caused a massive explosion and showered burning debris over surrounding buildings and the streets below. America was under attack. According to the official story, the attackers were Islamic extremists from Saudi Arabia and several other Arab nations, reportedly financed by Saudi fugitive Osama bin Laden, whose organisation Al-Qaeda. They were allegedly acting in retaliation for America's support of Israel, its involvement in the Persian Gulf War, and its continued military presence in the Middle East. Some of the terrorists had lived in the United States for more than a year and taken flying lessons at American commercial flight schools. Others had slipped into the country in the months before September 11th and acted as the muscle in the operation. The 19 terrorists easily smuggled box cutters and knives through security at 3 East Coast airports and boarded 4 flights bound for California. Chosen because the planes were loaded with fuel for a long transcontinental journey. Soon after takeoff, the terrorists commandeered the 4 planes and took the controls, transforming ordinary commuter jets into guided missiles. As the millions watched the events unfolding in New York, American Airlines Flight 77 circled over downtown Washington and slammed into the west side of the Pentagon military headquarters at 9:45 a.m. Jet fuel from the Boeing 757 caused a devastating inferno that led to the structural collapse of a portion of the giant concrete building. All told, 125 military personnel and civilians were killed in the Pentagon, along with all 64 people aboard the airliner. Less than 15 minutes after the terrorists struck, the nerve center of U.S. military, the horror in New York took a catastrophic turn for the worse when the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed in a massive cloud of dust and smoke. The structural steel of the skyscraper, built to withstand winds of excess of 200 miles an hour and a large conventional fire, could not withstand the tremendous heat generated by burning jet fuel. At 10:30 a.m., the Outer Trade Center tower collapsed. The other Trade Center collapsed. Close to 3,000 people died in the World Trade Center and its vicinity, including a staggering 343 firefighters and 123 paramedics, and 23 New York police officers, and 37 Port Authority police officers, who were struggling to complete an evacuation of the building and save the office workers trapped in the higher floors. Only 6 people in the World Trade Center towers at the time of their collapse survived. Almost 10,000 others were treated for injuries, many severe. Meanwhile, a fourth California-bound plane, United Airlines 93, was hijacked about 40 minutes after leaving Newark International Airport in New Jersey. Because the plane had been delayed in takeoff, passengers on board learned of the events in New York and Washington via cell phone and airphone calls from the ground. Knowing that their aircraft was not returning to an airport as the hijackers claimed, a group of passengers and flight attendants planned an insurrection. One of the passengers, Thomas Barnett Jr., told his wife over the phone, "I know we're all going to die. There's 3 of us who are going to do something about it. I love you, honey." Another passenger, Todd Beamer, was heard saying, "Are you guys ready? Let's roll," over the open line. Sandy Bradshaw, a flight attendant, called her husband and explained that she had slipped into the galley and was filling pitchers with boiling water. Her last words were him, "Everyone's running to first class. I've got to go, bye." The passengers fought the 4 hijackers and are suspected to have attacked the cockpit with a fire extinguisher. The plane then flipped over and sped towards the ground at up to 500 miles per hour, crashing into rural fields in western Pennsylvania at 10:10 a.m. All 45 people aboard were killed, with its intended target is not known, although theories include the White House, US Capitol Hill, and Camp David, presidential retreat in Maryland, on one of the several nuclear power plants along the eastern seaboard. Now, what I've read is the trajectory of the plane suggested most likely was Capitol Hill, rather than anywhere else. But anyway, at 7 p.m., President George Bush, who had spent the day being shuttled around the country for security concerns, returned to the White House. At 9 p.m., he delivered a televised address from the Oval Office declaring, "Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America." And I'll leave it at that.
Do you know, the bit that got me on that day was not only seeing the plane hit, it was watching the people jumping.
Yes.
And it just sticks into my brain.
One of the things that was never mentioned in a lot of the actual programs at the time was a lot of things appeared to be falling from the sky, and there were bodies. Quite a number of bodies.
Which is for a long time symbol to the church of the very worst of paganism.
Hold on.
The word which comes from the...
Go away. Yes. One of the main things you see littered on the ground around the tower prior to collapse were bodies. And they've come and did their damnedest to make sure that no one actually filmed that or broadcast it. It was filmed but not broadcast, so the best to avoid it. So,
yeah, but you could actually see them jumping from the building.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that was sort of muted, and as a psychotherapist, I can understand the idea that people were basically doing that because they decided, I'm going to die. I'm going to decide when I die, not some plane. So I'm going to jump out now because I'm deciding when I'm going to die, not when this falls down because of what they've done. It's my decision.
Yeah. See?
Remember when you were talking about it the other day, and I said about the expert pilot, and I couldn't remember what his name was. Yeah.
You have to remind me.
Well, the expert pilot actually said that it was physically impossible for it to happen with the planes that they say they had. The pilot I'm talking about is former CIA and civilian pilot who has sworn an affidavit stating that no planes flew into Twin Towers.
Oh, yes. So, yes.
As it would have been physically impossible. The pilot in question was John Lear, son of Learjet inventor Bill Lear. So he knows what he's talking about when it comes to planes.
I still don't accept that.
He has given expert evidence that it would be physically impossible for a Boeing 767, like flights to AA-11 and UA-175, to have hit the Twin Towers on 9/11.
Why is it physically impossible? I don't understand how you
Particularly
can
when
say.
flown by inexperienced pilots, no Boeing 767 airliner hit the towers, as fraudulently alleged by the government. Such crashes did not occur. They are physically impossible, as depicted, for following reasons. In the case of UAL-175 going into the South Tower, a real Boeing 767 would have begun to telescope when the nose hit the 14-inch steel columns, which are 39 inches on centre. The vertical horizon tail would have instantly separated from the aircraft when it hit the steel box of columns and fallen to the ground. And no debris from the planes were ever found, apart from one piece of fuselage, which, once again, didn't fit the planes that they said hit the towers.
There's two problems that always come to mind. These are physical existing planes that have otherwise completely vanished. And what did they do with all the people that were on the planes? Where were they gone? Were they mass executed and bodies hidden? You know, there are people who have disappeared who were on those planes. Where are they now? And where are the planes now if there weren't planes being flown into the buildings? You see, that's one of the problems that never really gets answered by conspiracy theorists who claim there was no planes flying into the buildings.
Said that, I mean, the guy's just saying that those particular planes weren't responsible. He's not saying that planes didn't hit it. He's saying the planes that they said wasn't the ones that hit the towers.
Where are those planes?
Because they wouldn't have reacted that way. He's saying the Boeings that they say hit the towers just wouldn't react the way that they did. Especially flown by people who didn't really know how to fly them.
Well, again, I don't understand why that would be the case. We have quite long, lengthy records now of those guys learning to fly the planes, Mohammed Atta being one of them, and other guys. So they were actually quite, what's the word I'm looking for, proficient pilots.
David Lloyd said that the day before 9/11, 2.3 trillions went missing out of the budget and was forgotten after the disaster. He said that 300 billion in gold was missing under building 3 and 4, or 3, 4, whatever. Only 230 million recovered.
I really want Dave's put here. Dave, I'll issue this challenge to you, my friend. As you probably know, because you're a regular guest, in September, Ben, I forget his name, is coming back on. We're going to discuss this in detail.
Ben Evelyn Jones.
Yes, chap. Find me the evidence, Dave. Find me the actual references you've got for these claims about gold being missing, etc. Because I've come across the gold reserve one being floated before, but the records just show that this gold wasn't there in the first place. It was nothing like as much as has been claimed.
Yeah, and he also says in all these disasters, the Boston bombings, London bombings, 9/11, there were military drills going on at the same time.
There was. I mean, it's not just that. It's some of the so-called hijackers that they said died on the planes. They're alive.
Yeah.
They actually contacted the government afterwards and said, I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Yet there's no evidence other than hearsay. There's no evidence for these things, Steve. There's a lot of rumours going around about this, but there's no evidence. It doesn't exist. The only person who ever claimed that they survived was the father, Mohammed Atta, who claimed he spoke to his son several hours afterwards. But again, there's no verification. There's no phone records to show it. It's just him claiming it.
So we're going to talk about this more when you talk to Ben Emlyn Jones,
Absolutely. Yeah? Yeah.
You're not going to get any confirmation from the Yanks, are you? Because
but then you can say anything you want.
Yeah. So we'll come back to this discussion back on then.
I mean, there's some witness testimony that says the planes that flew into the tower were actually grey. They weren't Boeings at all.
Again, that's just to do with lighting. There's claims there were missiles stuck on the bottom of the planes. It's like, the fact is we've actually got video footage of both of them. Not just the second one, because of course by that point cameras are trained on it. There was the French TV crew who were making a programme about the New York Fire Department who actually captured on camera the first plane hitting. And it looks like a plane. There's no two ways about it. The problem is, and this is something I talked about briefly last time, is that the American mindset, the idea that this could be perpetrated by foreign individuals domestically in their country is so abhorrent to them that they can't handle the idea that this is really what happened. And what we're doing over here in this country is swallowing it wholesale. We're not saying, well, look, what's your evidence? There's lots of hearsay stuff. There's lots of claims. He said, she said, this said. Because we don't, the evidence isn't shown. And I stand by what I'm saying to you. Is because America has real difficulty dealing with the idea that this could have happened domestically and no one known about it. No one was able to prevent it. I mean, it's all-powerful, incredible CIA people. How could they have not known this was going to happen? How could they have not prevented it? Well, they're not, they're not all seeing. Okay, they have fingers in various pies and they're spying people they probably shouldn't be spying. They're spying people that need to be spotted and they don't tell us about. But they're not all powerful. They can make mistakes. There were warning signs that these people were acting suspiciously. I know one of the pilots who took over the plane was reported a number of times for making very odd claims about being able to fly planes and not being able to do it. Now, I'm going to get all this information. I have it sort of to hand when we do the proper show about it, so I'm not just sort of talking off the top of my head. But, he was reported to have been acting very erratically and not interested in learning how to land a plane, only how to fly the plane. And when we were talking lessons about landing, he wasn't even attending. He just wanted to know how to fly a large plane. There were warning signs, something was afoot, but no one did anything about it. Back in the day before 9/11, Andy's been to America loads of times. You could get onto a plane, like you get onto a bus or a train over here. There was no security. You were asked, did you pack your own luggage? Yes, I did. You walked past. There wasn't even metal detectors. And half these airports, for domestic flights, they were treated as flying trains, in terms of level of security.
Dave says there was a load of people that were told not to fly that day, and one of them was the mayor of San Francisco.
That's a very specific one, Dave. Find a record of that.
Well, it's like Building 7 contained a $15 million emergency command centre, and yet the mayor evacuated his team to a makeshift command centre as soon as the attack had started.
Because they thought the building itself was unsound and dangerous.
The thing is, there was nothing wrong with Building 7. They collapsed it.
Now you see, I've done a bit
completely vertical.
It was.
Building 7 was a complete vertical drop.
Building 7 was partly on fire already, and they were concerned. Now, this is where it does get into conspiracy, because from what I've been reading, the building was on fire, lower parts of it. They've been hit by debris, as several other buildings, from the collapse of the towers. They were concerned about its whether it was going to fall or stand, and they decided to pull it, as in demolish it, because it did have very sensitive records. It didn't want them kind of spread all over the streets, as obviously we've seen all the paper go flying everywhere when the buildings collapsed. So,
I mean, the problem we've got with this is I could sit here with the actual US government paperwork on my desk, and you'd still say, show me the proof.
I'm happy to discuss when we've got actual real evidence. We can hearsay all sorts of things about this sort of thing.
We're going to come back to this topic when we do the full show.
That's it. It's like any.
I want to address a couple of points.
It's like any conspiracy theory. There is no solid evidence of it, otherwise it wouldn't be a theory anymore. Yeah,
but if you want to make specific claims about things, you need to be able to produce specific evidence about things. I'm not sure what Viscount's talking about here.
No, I'm not either.
I mean,
sure,
everything I've mentioned so far, I've actually found online.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can find it online. You can find anything online, let's be honest. We need to make sure we're talking about verifiable sites with real information. Look at when Sue and I were talking off air earlier today about Before It's News. Before It's News is a website that presents itself as a news website with information that is based around...
is that there isn't any verifiable sites.
No, it's like Dave Noyes just said.
Any.
Shares in two air companies, American Airlines and United, dropped sharply a few days before 9/11.
Yeah, I've read that
That's
as well.
verifiable. Show us the evidence. I know they dropped dramatically after the event, and maybe that's a misunderstanding there. Not saying Dave did, but
perhaps we won't have the evidence. You know what I mean? Perhaps it's just obviously what's been, like you said, what's been said online. So
yes, there are sources of information you can accept as being verifiable, and sources of information that are a joke. Like,
The
would
problem is the only verifiable information you're ever going to get is what the Yanks tell us.
And that's then the world government conspiracy. Now we're back to number 8, New World Order, and World War
Right.
conspiracy.
Viscount's just said that he was. You were saying about we don't have the real security, hence why he's retalked further back about.
We didn't. Back before 9/11, you go to America with domestic fight in America, and I know Mandy's been on lots of them. Security was a joke. You were cursorily searched. I mean, to pat it down a bit, half of the airports didn't have metal detectors. Often you were asked, "Did you pack your bag, sir?" "Yes, I did." "Fine, off you go." It was a joke. How on earth do you think they got metal knives on these planes?
I can agree with that.
The security was tightened
Well,
up.
I've got a feeling.
It wasn't so in this country.
Oh yeah, I mean, we've been better at. We've been good at security because of the IRA in Northern Ireland. So we've always been tight on security. But America,
I've got a feeling when you do that show with Ben Emlyn Jones, it's going to be very controversial and very long. So watch this space, guys. I think it's around about the 28th of September.
I'm saying it today. I'm happy for people to come on and say whatever they want, but please back it up. Give us some evidence that is reliable. I'm talking about websites and information sources that we can accept are trying to pursue some version of the truth. They're not all conspiracy based. They're not all trying to push agendas that are to our detriment. I stand by 100% what I'm saying. The biggest problem with 9/11 is, and it'll come on to conspiracy number 1, because this is where it all turns on its head, but 9/11 is an example where the Americans simply can't believe that they were that foolish and naive to think that because of the other side of the world to the Middle East, it was never going to affect them directly. They had multiple warnings. They had multiple attacks. I mean, it wasn't even the first time the Twin Towers had been attacked. They tended to bomb it back in the 90s. They actually drove a transit van full of explosives into the basement of the bloody building and blew it up. So they knew they were under threat and they didn't do anything about it. They were just too... They believed themselves, they believed their own hype, that they were untouchable. And they discovered they weren't. And that is the biggest problem.
Viscount's put there, how can you back something up when we don't or will never hold any evidence, just theories?
But you can just sit here and type whatever you like, Viscount. I'm not you guys, I'm saying anybody can. I can sit here and type all sorts of things without showing any kind of evidence of what I'm saying. You can easily do it. I mean, I got into a discussion, this is completely off the topic really, but I got into a discussion with someone a little while ago on a forum about the term warlock. This is off the chart a little bit here, but I want to talk about this. There was a pagan website talking about the term warlock has been historically linked to oathbreaker and is always in a negative connotation. And there's one person came on and said, well, in Scotland, it's always been seen as being another term for a wizard and not being negative at all. And as soon as you put that one sentence that she said into Google, it took you to one website that said word for word what she just said. And yet when I produce several books I've got here, examples of it, that it is a term that's been known through the Anglo-Saxon languages as being primarily a negative, oath-breaking, nasty person term, they wouldn't have it. And yet they then said, well, it's obviously a Proto-Celt term. Now, Proto-Celt doesn't even exist as a language. So they were trying to put forward this argument that this word came from Proto-Celt, I suppose, ancient language. And on my point of view, academically, it doesn't exist. Proto-Celt is a term used for an amalgamation of several languages. None are individually, they exist, but they're not one single language, and they went all a bit silly. So, that's what you can produce evidence of something and demonstrate that there might be an error in what's being said. So you can do that.
David Lloyd is throwing a spanner in the works, the cat's among the pigeons.
He's thinking the same as me.
Can you prove it wrong? It works both ways.
Evidence.
The problem is we don't have any evidence.
Then what's the point of talking about it?
We have lots of conjecture and theories of what...
Yeah, but you can have theories that are based on evidence, and evidence are based on theories.
My account says that there we are, just dismiss it, yeah? Don't dismiss everything. Take a moment to really direct all avenues. That's all he's saying.
I've just sat here and made it all up.
No, we're not saying that.
Right out, use your phone again.
What we're saying is, what you're taking as evidence, are sites that are backed by the US government.
Now listen, I'll say what I said again. You can create theories based on evidence or evidence based on theories.
Yes, but where's the evidence in the first place? That's
But
what we're
these
saying.
are totally different.
The only evidence we've actually got is what is coming out of official sources. That's the only evidence we've got.
We also have the evidence of our own eyes. We've repeatedly watched the multiple recordings of the second plane crashing in. Were they all fake? Was every one of them fake?
Right. Can I just...
No, you're not getting away with this. Oh, no.
Can I just say...
What I said about the pilot I read out earlier...
One person. That's one person, Steve.
No. No, hang on a minute. I read that statement.
A series of different people involved in the airline industry made the same statement, said, look, I can verify this. Here's the evidence of the mathematical formula that demonstrate this was the case. Fine. One person on their own is not enough.
Now, guys.
I read that statement, of a qualified pilot who said that the planes weren't Boeings.
Qualified...
No, hang on a minute. No, hang on. All this gentleman said was they were not Boeings because they didn't react the way a Boeing would.
How does he know?
Because he's flown the damn things.
How many of them has he seen crash into towers?
He knows how they react when they crash.
How many has he watched crash into a tower to know how the tower and the plane would react?
See, you're not even listening, Andy.
No,
you're not. You're not listening. You're taking your own standpoint and you won't listen.
Steve, I'm saying to you, how could he know?
We're talking about an expert on planes.
How many planes has he seen crash?
The man's father built the bloody Learjet, for Christ's sake. He knows how
Learjet and
planes
the
are put
767
together.
are completely different planes.
Well, I can tell you for certain that those engines should have turned up in the bubble, and they didn't.
I am saying to you, how does he know
the tail end
what
would
look
have fallen
like?
off, because it falls off when it hits the bloody floor.
Calm down!
No, I'm not. I'm not, because he's completely dissing what I'm saying without taking it.
No, I'm not, Steve. You're not listening to me. The guy cannot state categorically what would happen in a theoretical situation without carrying out experiments to discover exactly what would happen. He's one pilot. How many planes has he watched crash into towers?
Can we leave this for the main show?
No, because at the same point, the man's an expert on aeroplanes.
That doesn't mean a damn thing if he's never actually flown a plane himself into a tower.
Every single plane that's ever crashed, the tail end falls off. Every single one.
How many planes?
It happens the same way. If it hits a bloody building or it hits a tree.
Crashed into a tower. Answer that one, Steve.
It happens every time, Andy.
What?
Every crash you've ever seen, the tail end falls off.
Show me one more plane that's crashed into a tower.
It doesn't matter whether it's a tower or not. That's
does.
the way the planes are built.
That does not matter. It matters enormously. If you flew a plane,
Excuse me, even the people in the
plane into a mountain and flew a plane into a tower block,
this
do
is
you
getting
think
a bit
the plane
out of
would
hand.
react a little differently?
It's not, because the tail end always falls off.
It does not fall off.
That's all the man said.
That plane was going straight into that tower at 300 miles an hour.
Actually, it wasn't.
Slow down!
It was weren't going straight anywhere. It was going at an angle. It caught the
300 miles an hour that plane was
flying. The building, which would have hurt the box structure of the building and ripped the wing straight off.
Miles an hour the plane was flying at. 300 miles an hour. Now, no one disputes that one.
Right, well, Retroman's just said good night. It's got to get up early in the morning.
Oh, when did that?
David Lloyd is saying order. I think this one's getting a bit out of hand. And I'm dreading for the 28th of September.
This is nothing compared to September, blimey.
Oh my God. So you've scared Vectraman off.
Oh, yeah. This is what it should be about. Good discussion.
Yeah, but it's not a discussion when you just diss it.
Well, it is, Steve, because I'm giving you reasons why I'm dissing. I'm not saying you're talking crap. I'm saying to you, he can't say that. He's not carried out experiments with 300-ton aircraft into huge tower blocks. A plane going at 300 miles an hour, there's not time for its tower to fall off. The whole thing goes straight into the building.
But anyway, can we go on to the last one now?
The building was stronger than the bloody plane. It would have done what you said. It would have concertinaed and just broke up. It would have done a lot of damage, but not what they said it did. Not that particular plane.
There's a
that
problem.
Plane wouldn't have done what they said it did.
There's a problem with what he said, because he's basing that statement, I just looked it up, on the conventional tower design.
He's basing it on
one
that
huge problem.
plane.
There's one huge problem with the design of the World Trade Centers. If you watch the programs, you'll find this is there. Most tower blocks, main strength is in its outer shell. Is the external shell construction, and it's built in from the outer shell.
On there.
Hold on, listen. You know what I'm saying? The Twin Towers were revolutionary in their design. Their strength is in the core, not the outer shell.
Yes, but
the
it still had the conventional steel box on the outside.
No, it wasn't. The buildings were different. Their core is the shell. The core is the strength of the building. The outer shell was glass and metal, nothing more.
It still has to have a steel structure. Otherwise,
Yes,
there's nothing to put the glass and metal into.
The structure was in the core, not in the outer shell.
Andy,
virtually every other tower block built with its strength.
Pure building fact says if there's no outer core, you can't attach a bloody window to it.
Steve, look it up. This is why they were unique.
Andy, you're forgetting the point. There has to have been an outer core as well.
Yes, which was steel and glass, nothing
Same
more.
as every other bloody building.
No, it's Steve. Look it up. These are the facts. The Twin Tower construction was unique, as its strength was in its inner core. Look it up.
I know it was the inner core, Andy.
So it
the
wasn't
problem is
any
the outside
other
still has to have some strength to it and have a steel box fixed.
glass.
Viscount is saying if the core is the strength, science says that it was hotter than a volcano in the centre of the Twin Towers.
No, I'm not making this
How
up.
would that have been possible?
I'm not making this up.
I know, I'm
The
just...
fact of the design.
Right,
This
okay.
is why they responded the way it did, because the way it was built.
Right, okay, can we stop this one, please, until the 28th of September? It's getting a bit out of hand.
It's not.
It is. Get on with your... Even the bloody people in the chat room have turned around and saying stuff.
That's what discussion's supposed to be, blimey. Anyway,
It's getting late.
number one's JFK.
JFK.
End of the night. Goodbye.
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
Right.
I'm going to dread I'm leaving you lot to it on the 28th.
I'm watching telly.
Go on.
Dear.
JFK.
Yes. Who killed JFK?
His wife.
Yes. No, it was the Martians. I've decided. I think it was aliens after all. Yes. Now, this is the interesting thing, you see. We have, psychologically speaking, the reverse problem. Because I was saying to you that one of the things the Americans have problems with dealing with is the idea that their military and their industrial complex and their brains couldn't deal with the idea of this happening. The converse with JFK is that the reason why the conspiracies exist is because we couldn't deal with the idea that one person acted alone. So the conspiracies grow out of that. The trouble is, it's back to front because there is so much evidence of a conspiracy. We can argue until the cats come home and the cows come home, whatever it is that comes home, how it was actually carried out. But there's so much evidence that there was at least two gunmen firing at Kennedy that day. The evidence is incontrovertible. And the fact that you've got two people firing is a conspiracy. No matter how big or involved the conspiracy is, that is a conspiracy by definition. So that's number one, the biggest of all, because it's the one that's had the greatest impact on the world. Because, of course, if JFK had lived, there probably would never have been a Vietnam War and the disaster that led to. There would have been wholesale changes in the military structure of America, including the disbandment of the CIA, and curtailing some of the powers of the Pentagon being brought directly back into government control. So the fact that it changed the world was changed dramatically by the assassination of Kennedy, that virtually everybody who was in a serious position of power would have wanted him out of the way. That's the top 10 conspiracies. Good night. I see Steve's run away. Has he run off? Can't take it.
No, he hasn't. He's still here.
He's not on screen.
I don't know.
Oh, whoa!
What?
Bloody hell.
What?
Bloody hell. The very moment, I'm not joking, the very moment Steve said I am, he faded into view on the camera. This laptop is a bit slow, so it's not running real time, you're occasionally moving about, and he literally, like he was teleported into screen.
I don't know.
That was really freaky.
Well, according to Dave Lloyd, they said we might not be here on the 28th of September.
I thought anyone was going to be apart from me and Ben, actually.
I don't know why. What's this? Confirmed. 2.5 mile wild comet expected on the 28th, between the 15th and 28th of September.
Oh, blimey, but cancel the show then.
What's confirmed?
A 2.5 mile wide comet.
Bloody damn big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to skip us.
It'll probably skip us. So
Yeah,
we end up in the water anyway.
Hopefully, after atmosphere and all that. I think if it was definitely heading for us, we'd know a bit more about it by now, wouldn't we?
It's supposed to miss us by about, I don't
2.5
know,
feet.
Right. 2.5 feet.
28,000 miles or something.
Right.
Stupid.
Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to let everybody calm down a bit while I do the forthcoming events. Fed up of wading through the activities and events that other advertisers include? Find just what you're looking for at paranormaleventsforyou.com, your one-stop paranormal directory. Well, first up, we've got Tony Stockwell doing his tour for 2015. He's up at the Lincoln Drill Hall on the 24th, and on the 25th he's at the Queen's Hall, Winter Gardens, Margate. Derek Acora is doing his Psychic Ether tour. On the 25th he's at the White Tower in Blackpool. Between the 26th and 28th there's the Jamaica Inn and Bodmin Jail investigation. For more ghostly details you can visit jamaicainn.co.uk. And on the 27th, It's Paranormal is at Newsham Park Orphanage in Orphan Drive, Liverpool. For more information on these and other events, visit paranormaleventsforyou.com. Paranormaleventsforyou.com also offers banner advertising for only £10 per year. See our website for more details. Paranormaleventsforyou.com, your one-stop paranormal directory. Right, and well, on next week's show, what have we got? Is it possible that ritual magic and the occult can aid communication with the dead? This is a question we'll be asking. The Enigma experiment is a new and exciting challenge, and John Blackburn and Maxine Jane Bridges are pushing the boundaries in a new, unique approach to paranormal investigations. Using a Kabbalistic experiment, could this unconventional method be a new a new way to communicate and interact with the spirit world? Andy?
Well, I'm going to be directly involved in that project. I'm part of Enigma myself now, so it should be interesting. We'll be discussing in great detail the proposed plans for future events, which we're going to try and explore things a little differently. There's been a lot of groups, of course, that do the average ghost hunt, but we're looking for locations and people to be involved and try something a little different. I mean, as you know, I've had a lot of experience working with occult stuff, so we're going to try some new ideas. But I'm sure John and Maxine can tell you far more about it next week. Okay.
So basically, that's it for tonight's show. Now, if you would like to be on the show, then contact us at show@ktpf.co.uk, when we're open to discuss any specific area within this genre, including ghosts, UFOs, cryptozoology, psychic phenomena, or other supernatural and unexplained mysteries. Don't forget, it's your show, so get involved. Issue 4 of our magazine that accompanies the show is out soon, with contributions from many names within the topics we cover, plus our regular features and much more. You can click on the link bar on the menu, navigation bar, to view our online digital flip page version or to download your own PDF version of our magazine. We are always looking for contributions from people within these subjects, i.e. showcasing groups or highlighting venues. So if you would like to add an article to the KTPF magazine, then please send your articles to editor@ktpf.co.uk. Well, Andy, thank you for covering for us for tonight. Unfortunately, if you've just joined us and
I regretted it, but yeah.
and wondered where Dave Rowntree was, we had a bit of a connection problem with him. Basically, I don't know what happened, but he don't seem to have been able to connect to Skype at the time allotted. So hopefully we'll get him back on another time. Issue 4, it's coming along quite well, is it?
Oh yes, absolutely. I've got pretty much the content. We need to decide between what's going to be on the cover, but yeah, I mean, pretty much it's going to be rolling out probably next week's show.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us in the chat room. I hope to see you again next week. And Viscount says he enjoyed the show, and thanks Andy for his insight. We hope we have you've enjoyed tonight's show, and hope to have your company again next week at 8 p.m. on www.ktpf.co.uk. Thanks for listening to the KTPF Community Talk Show, which is supported by Phenomena Magazine and Beyond Parazine, and sponsored by Craig and Os Castle.
That place in Wales.
He didn't have it.
He's still too annoyed with me.
And sponsored by
Craig and Os Castle, South Wales, one of the most haunted castles in Wales. For more information on ghostly and ghastly events, including Fright Nights, all-night investigations and hen parties, visit www.mosthauntedcastle.com.
Well, it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
And it's good night for me flying a plane.
Until next time, all there's left to say is
keep the paranormal
friendly. Good night and God bless.
Just argue a lot.
This is where it's at.
To see in the night, to measure the spike, to see how cold it's been. I buy my kit so I won't forget the ghosties that I have seen. The Paranormal Intelligence Gathering Services Ghost Store. So visit www.the-pigs.co.uk/ghost store.